Chapter 1301. Zhang Yan asked, "What is the name of this treasure that Ding Chu spoke of?" Chu Gongtan said, "This water is called Hun Huan." According to Ding Chen's idea, any treasure refined from the 5 elements can be dissolved upon contact with it. Zhang Yan thought for a moment. If it really was that powerful, then he had to refine it no matter what. The mountain and sea realm was boundless, and there were countless spiritual items and treasures. The 9 continents couldn't compare to it. If he spent some effort, he would definitely be able to find something suitable. He asked, "What is the method to refine this treasure?" Chu Gongtan said, "I've already memorized it. I can write it down." Zhang Yan was non-committal and said, "Did Ding Chen leave a letter back then?" Chu Gongtan said, "Headmaster Chen left behind a jade scroll, which was previously kept in the Baoyang courtyard's offering pavilion. Before the realm was moved, it was sent to the small realm of the Daylight Temple to avoid losing it. If Jinren wants to take a look, I can go take a look later." Zhang Yan thought for a moment and said, "There is no need. Headmaster Chu, please wait here for a moment." He took out a talisman and passed it to Jingyu, saying, "Take this to Jinren Hua." Ding Chen was a member of the Chen clan. The method to refine the treasure had never been given to the clan, so it was his own. Even though Huoxian could order the Chen clan to give it to him, it would be difficult for Huoxian to do this outside of the Daylight Temple. The talisman contained a strand of pure violet spirit. Exchanging a precious treasure for a treasure that no one had been able to refine for thousands of years wasn't a bad deal. Jingyu accepted the order and left. A short while later, he returned and said, "Master, I've brought the jade slip back." As he spoke, he took out a jade slip from his sleeve and placed it on the table. Zhang Yan looked at it and saw that the jade slip was 3 inches wide. It was more than 2 feet long, and there were several mysterious etchings on it. It looked simple and heavy. Jingyu cupped his hands. "Master? Master, this is a secret seal of the Chen clan. Only those with the bloodline of the clan can undo it." Hall Master Hua heard that Old Master needed it, so he asked perfected Qin Feng to come over. Just now, he has returned to his original appearance. Chu Gongtan was also taken aback when he heard this. As the monastery head, he did not know that there were other mysteries in the jade strip. In other words, it was very likely that what he knew was not only incomplete, or there may be mistakes in it. Thinking of this, he frowned. Zhang Yan was not surprised by this at all and had even expected it. He had started from an inconspicuous lower house disciple and cultivated step by step to where he was today. He was well aware that many cultivators would set up such arrangements. It was not only the people of aristocratic families, but many masters and disciples would do the same. This was to prevent their secret techniques from being leaked, and at the same time, it was to prevent them from being easily obtained by other sections. He flicked his finger at the jade slip. A ray of light shot up from the sky and turned into a screen of light. Densely packed words appeared on it. He took a closer look. According to Ding Chen's description, as long as he gathered all the precious materials and refined this water, and there was enough of it, he could indeed break through the death evaluation pagoda in one go. However, this treasure had a flaw. After the water was used, it would return to nothingness. If he wanted to use it again, he would need to refine it again. And the precious materials needed to refine it were all extremely rare. Obviously, it could not be used as an ordinary Dharma treasure. It could only be used as a trump card at a critical moment. But then again, as long as he defeated the Heavenly Ghost tribe, at least the East, North, and West continents would no longer be a threat. At that time, there would be no precious materials that could not be found, and he would not need to care about this. He waved his sleeve and sent the jade strip to Chu Gongtan, saying, "Ding Chu, is there anything else that needs to be added?" Chu Gongtan took a step forward and took it. After a few glances, a bitter smile appeared on his face. Compared to what he had seen before, not only were there many more precious materials, but even the refining method was more detailed and complicated than before. He could not help but blame this senior of his. If he only used the description he provided and refined countless precious materials to refine a pile of useless things, he feared that he would not be able to explain himself even if he had to sacrifice his life. However, the refining method of today was also much more brilliant than it was thousands of years ago. He carefully considered for a moment and also made a few pertinent suggestions. Zhang Yan said, "The refining of the treasure will be arranged by Dean Chu. As for the precious materials, the sect will find a way to gather them." Chu Gongtan said, "Then I will immediately start preparing after I return." Zhang Yan thought that many of the precious materials used to refine the Hunhuan were taken from ancient plants. After ordering Chu Gongtan to leave, he left the hall and went to an island in the cold Jade Sea province. This was where the Danding courtyard was today. Although the Qinsong school had been established here for less than 10 years, the island was already full of strange flowers and plants, and there were even many plant spirits that looked like naughty children playing there. When Zhang Yan came over, there was a magnificent aura descending. These spirits were all startled, and they all burrowed into the ground, or retracted their branches, or curled up their bodies, not daring to show themselves again. Several mountaintops became bare in the blink of an eye. Zhou Chongju was walking in the medicine garden when he noticed the movement. He looked up at the sky and said with a smile, "It turns out that junior brother is here." Zhang Yan slowly descended, cupped his fists, and said, "Senior brother." He turned to look and saw two young men standing in the distance. Their gazes were filled with curiosity and respect. He smiled and asked, "Are those the two new disciples I've taken in?" Zhou Chongju smiled and said, "That's right, these two are Zhang Xianlan and Sheng Qingxiao. They both cultivate Jade Heaven sex techniques." He called out, "This is your martial uncle, why aren't you coming forward to greet him?" The two young people heard this and quickly came forward, bowed, and said, "Greetings, martial uncle." Zhou Chongju stroked his beard and nodded. Although these two disciples were under his tutelage, even if they didn't care about Zhang Yan's face, they still had to take into account Hall Master Du Zhen's identity, so they were only counted as his grand disciples in name. Zhang Yan nodded slightly. He flicked his finger, and two spiritual lights flew into the eyebrows of the two and said, "Since you are under Master Zhou's tutelage, I will give each of you a treasure. After you cultivate the mysterious light, you can refine it." The two young people were pleasantly surprised and bowed to thank him. Zhou Chongju saw that the two of them were trembling slightly. He knew that even if Zhang Yan had restrained his aura, it would still be difficult for them to stand firmly in front of him with their cultivation. He said, "The two of you can leave first." The two young people bowed respectfully, then left. Zhou Chongju asked, "Junior brother, you are taking charge of the situation on behalf of the sect leader. What brings you here today?" Zhang Yan explained the reason for his visit, and then said, "Junior brother, I've been thinking about it for a while. Since I can find more than half of the plants and vegetation from the mountain and sea realm, I've come to see if I can find some that I can use." Zhou Chongju stroked his beard and said, "Although I'm not an expert in equipment forging, when I was young, I thought that I was more talented than others, so I dabbled in the Tao. I know that when it comes to forging items, precious materials are the result of careful deliberation. If I were to hastily change them, they might not be completely useless, but there would definitely be some discrepancies. Since I originally used materials from the 9 continents, I might not be able to use the plants and vegetation from the mountain and sea realm." "Oh," Zhang Yan said, "from what you're saying, senior brother, you seem to have some other method?" Zhou Chongju laughed. "I don't have any other method, but if I could get my hands on ancient plants and vegetation from the 9 continents, then I wouldn't need to replace them with items from the mountain and sea realm." Zhang Yan was surprised. "I heard that those ancient plants and vegetation have long since gone extinct. Could it be that senior brother has some left behind?" Zhou Chongju laughed. "Junior brother, back when you were in the Pill Cauldron courtyard, you knew that I loved collecting exotic plants and flowers. I found quite a few that had gone extinct in ancient times, but most of them had already turned into wood and stone. Although they looked dead, they still contained life force within them. With enough spiritual opportunity to nourish them for a few dozen years, they would come back to life. I had originally planned to wait until the sect had rid itself of its external enemies before making the necessary arrangements. But since junior brother is in a hurry, I might as well do it first." Zhang Yan was a bit surprised that the matter had been resolved so easily. Just now he knew that in order to raise such plants and vegetation, the amount of spiritual opportunity required would be enough to support several Taoists of the heavenly abode. No wonder he had been unable to grow them in the 9 continents. But now that he was in the mountain and sea realm, where spiritual opportunity was almost limitless, there were no such restrictions. "I'll have to trouble you with this, senior brother," he said. Zhou Chongju said, "It is my duty to help the sect." Zhang Yan came out of the Pill Cauldron courtyard, but he was not in a hurry to go beyond the heavens. At this moment, there was still one more thing he needed to do. Right now, there was still a demonic forefather lingering above the northern heaven frigid abyss. If he did not deal with it, he would not be at ease to leave. So he soared up into the sky and arrived outside the Qi barrier. He silently circulated his energy and looked around. 10 days later, he found his target. With a step, a clear light flashed, and he flew in that direction. At this time, demonic forefather Go Yu was on a cliff cultivating her qi and blood. Suddenly, she felt an incomparably tyrannical aura coming towards her. If her senses were right, it should be the person who had captured Flaming Mane Ghost Forefather. She was shocked and wanted to retreat, but the other party's aura was firmly locked in place. There was no way to escape. All she could do was stand in place and not move. After a short while, a grand clear light fell, and a handsome black-robed Taoist walked out. He glanced at her indifferently and bowed, saying, "Greetings, fellow Taoist." Demonic forefather Go Yu calmed her mind and returned the greeting with the clan's etiquette. Then she asked with a slight vigilance, "What is the matter?" Zhang Yan walked a few steps to the edge of the cliff. He looked at the rainbow clouds in the western sky and stood there with his sleeves behind his back, saying, "If it's at least a few decades, if it's at most 100 years, the cultivators of the 9 continents will have a battle with the heavenly ghost tribe. Which side will you stand on?" Demonic forefather Go Yu was silent for a while, but she did not answer this question. Instead, she asked, "How is Flaming Mane Ghost Forefather?" Zhang Yan said, "So that heavenly ghost is called Flaming Mane. He has been killed by I." Demonic forefather Go Yu's body trembled. She said, "Ghost Forefather has an indestructible body." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "There will always be a day when heaven and earth will die. This person hasn't even left this world, so how can he be indestructible?" Demonic forefather Go Yu sighed faintly and said, "I didn't make things difficult for your people." Zhang Yan said indifferently, "If not, I wouldn't have come to talk to fellow Taoists today. The sects of the 9 continents will not leave our enemies outside. Fellow Taoist can decide whether to fight or to make peace." Chapter 1302. Hearing this, demonic ancestor Go Yu's expression became stern, and a murderous glint flashed in her eyes. Her blood qi surged, and her appearance changed greatly. Her black hair gradually turned silver, as if she couldn't help but want to attack. However, she was still afraid of Zhang Yan's strength, so she forcibly suppressed her boiling blood qi and sighed softly. 6,000 years ago, the heavenly ghost was powerful, and several ghost ancestors joined forces to invade the various tribes of the western desolate domain. My demonic moon bloodline was no exception and was defeated by the heavenly ghost. Because I'm the descendant of Bo Xian, and he considers himself the descendant of Bo Bai, he didn't kill me. He only forced me to make an oath that I won't be enemies with his descendants in the future. Not only that, if he needs help, I'm sorry I can't help you because of this." At this point, she changed the topic and said, "Although I promised them to deal with you, it's not my fault if I can't stop them." Zhang Yan smiled, understanding the meaning of her words. Although this demonic ancestor was forced to make an oath before, the restraint wasn't as great as imagined. At this moment, seeing that the sects of the 9 continents were powerful, she didn't want to risk her life to make things difficult for them. Even so, he wouldn't listen to this demon just because of this. With a flick of his sleeve, a page of golden book appeared. Demonic ancestor Go Yu didn't reach out to catch it. She let it float in front of her and asked vigilantly, "What is this?" Zhang Yan said, "This is a contract to bind the actions of both parties. I can leave today and won't make things difficult for you again if you put your soul and blood essence into it. Demonic ancestor Go Yu's expression changed slightly. Although she didn't know what the consequences would be after signing the contract, she could imagine that it would definitely not be a good thing. There were no words on the contract, but there was a divine intent on it. She only needed to look at it slightly to understand the meaning. It was asking her not to intervene before the outcome of the battle was decided. She knew that if she didn't sign it, she would end up like the fire main demonic ancestor. After hesitating for a moment, she forced out a wisp of blood chi from her fingertip and pressed it on the contract. After the contract absorbed the blood chi, it trembled slightly and turned into a golden light that flew up. Then it split into two. One flew towards Zhang Yan, while the other flew into the space between her eyebrows. Zhang Yan allowed the golden light to fall into his sleeve. Once the contract was signed, he would destroy the heavenly ghost tribe. There was no need to pay too much attention to this demon. As far as he was concerned, the best thing to do would be to just kill the woman. That way, he wouldn't have to waste any more energy. However, she was a demon patriarch, and if he fought her, he would have to pay a heavy price. Not only would the mountain and sea realm be damaged, but he would also be complying with the wishes of the heavenly ghost tribe. Therefore, he didn't even need to fight her. Demonic ancestor Go Yu was forced to sign the contract. She couldn't help but feel resentful. She said coldly, "The heavenly ghost tribe is not as simple as it looks. They have the help of the beyond heaven's upper realm. You must be careful." Zhang Yan said, "How much do you know about the beyond heaven's upper realm, fellow Taoist?" Demon ancestor Go Yu said, "This junior has hidden himself very deeply. I know very little about him. However, I have heard that more than 10,000 years ago, heavenly fire also fell from the South's 100 continents, and it was very similar to what the heavenly ghost tribe saw." With that, she bowed, turned into a silver light, and disappeared. Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows. If demonic ancestor Go Yu's words were true, if what demon patriarch Go Yu said was true, then the beyond heaven's upper realm must have been arranged by the beyond heaven's upper realm. However, it was also possible that demon patriarch Go Yu was unwilling to be forced to sign the contract, so she set up a bewildering barrier. However, from the information they had received previously, the 100 southern Civ continent had begun to stir after they occupied the frigid Jade Ocean continent. In such a large realm, there might be demon patriarchs as well. If they jumped out to oppose them now, it would be troublesome. When he returned, he would have to pay more attention. At this moment, outside the Frost Jade Sea Prefecture, an inky flood dragon was stretching its body, and its claws were waving as it climbed the clouds. Yuan Zhangqing stood on the back of the flood dragon and looked at the mountains and rivers in front of him. Because most of the islands in the Sea Prefecture were moved from the 9 continents, he felt a sense of déjà vu when he looked at it. Lu Xuanji looked around curiously and said, "Master, is this where the Qinsong School's mountain gate is?" He looked forward and saw a floating peak in the clouds. The temples and pavilions were faintly discernible, and he couldn't help but want to go over and explore. Yuan Zhangqing seemed to have seen through his intentions and said, "Follow me to visit your grandmaster first." He ordered the inky flood dragon under his feet to stop on an uninhabited island, and then he used a talisman. Not long after, a ray of light descended from the sky and landed in front of the two. Fu Baoxing stepped out and said with a smile, "Junior brother, you are back." Yuan Zhangqing came up and bowed, saying, "Senior brother." Fu Baoxing looked at Lu Xuanji and said with a smile, "Junior brother Yuan, is this your new disciple?" Yuan Zhangqing said, "Yes, Xuanji, this is your uncle master. Come up and greet him." Lu Xuanji came up and bowed, saying, "Greetings, uncle master." Fu Baoxing laughed and said, "No need to stand on ceremony. You are junior brother Yuan's eldest disciple, and as your uncle master, I don't have anything decent to give you. I will just give you this flying fish shuttle that I used when I was young." He waved his sleeves, and a spiritual light fell in front of him. Lu Xuanji's eyes widened, and he saw that it was a silver fish talisman. At this moment, it was jumping non-stop like a live fish that was pulled out of the water. He liked it very much, but he didn't accept it immediately. Instead, he turned to look at his master. Yuan Jianqing said, since it's a gift from your uncle master, then accept it. Lu Xuanji chuckled and went forward to accept it. He felt a slight struggle coming from the fish talisman, but he was even more delighted. After fiddling with it for a while, he looked up and asked, Uncle Master, what's the use of this treasure? Fu Baoxing said, this treasure has one benefit. As long as you infuse it with spiritual vigor, it can help you fly regardless of your cultivation. Lu Xuanji was even more delighted when he heard that. He bowed again. Thank you, Uncle Master. Yuan Jianqing said, go to the side and refine it. I have something to talk to your Uncle Master. Lu Xuanji responded and excitedly ran to the side to refine the fish talisman. Fu Baoxing smiled and said, recently, the Heavenly Ghost Tribe has been very restless. They have tried to attack the Earth Abyss several times. My master is busy with this matter and isn't in the sect at the moment. I'm afraid that you won't be able to meet him. Yuan Jianqing said, then I'll wait for my master to return. I'll go and meet him then. Fu Baoxing said, Junior apprentice brother has been outside for a long time. I'm afraid that you don't know that eldest apprentice sister and second apprentice brother have already achieved grotto heaven. Yuan Jianqing was a little surprised but felt that it was reasonable. He thought for a while and said, then I should send a gift. Fu Baoxing smiled and said, there's no rush. Eldest apprentice sister and second apprentice brother are wiping out the demons outside for the cold Jade Sea region. They won't be back for a while. Junior apprentice brother, do you want to set up a cave abode outside or cultivate in a small world? I'll arrange it for you. Yuan Jianqing thought for a while and felt that it was better to cultivate in a small world. However, he cultivated the Yuan Qin sensory nerve. At this stage, he needed to understand the changes in spiritual vigor through actual combat. It was better to go out and kill demons than to cultivate in seclusion. Moreover, it was more convenient for him to teach his disciples. Hence, he said, Junior apprentice brother wants to set up a cave abode outside. Fu Baoxing thought for a while and said, that's fine. The sea region is vast. Whatever you want, I'll arrange it for you. Yuan Jianqing said, I'll trouble you after I meet my master. As they spoke, the two heard cheers coming from the sea. Lu Xuanji was riding on the fish talisman, flying around in the sky. Sometimes he crashed into the waves and sometimes he pierced through the clouds. He was full of excitement. Fu Baoxing was a little surprised. Just now, he saw that Lu Xuanji's aptitude was only ordinary. He thought that it would take him a few days to create the fish talisman. He did not expect that in such a short time, Lu Xuanji had already done it well. Fu Baoxing sighed. Junior apprentice brother's disciple seems to be very talented. Yuan Jianqing looked over and said, let's see how far he can go. A few days later, Zhang Yan returned to the Duzhen Hall. Jing Yu came up to report that Yuan Jianqing had brought his disciples to the cold Jade Sea region. They were waiting to meet him. After thinking for a while, Jing Yu said, summon them. After receiving the order, Yuan Jianqing brought Lu Xuanji up to the floating heavenly palace. After reporting to the door, they entered the Duzhen Hall. He bowed and said, disciple greets my master. Lu Xuanji also knelt down and kowtowed, saying, Grand disciple Lu Xuanji greets Grandmaster. Zhang Yan nodded with a smile and said, rise, everyone. After Lu Xuanji stood up, because he was curious about his grandmaster, he sneaked a glance up. However, before he could see clearly, he felt a clear light in front of him. Before he could see anything, his head became dizzy. This was because the vital energy of his soul was too weak and it was oppressed. Fortunately, Fu Baoxing had already given him a jade talisman to protect himself before he came here. His body only swayed but he didn't collapse. Seeing him like this, Yuan Jianqing patted his back and channeled some energy into him. He said, guard the jade talisman with your mind. Lu Xuanji did as he was told. After a while, he felt that his vision was no longer dizzy, but he did not dare to look again. Zhang Yan said, disciple, you've been gone for a year, but your cultivation has improved a lot. What are your plans now that you're back? Yuan Jingqing said, I haven't seen my senior brothers and sisters for a long time, so I'd like to bring Xuanji to visit them. When I was outside earlier, I felt that I need to constantly comprehend the mysteries of the sensory nerves through battles, so I think I need to go out to train. Zhang Yan nodded slightly and said, recently, Zihong is re-establishing the Yaoyin sect and has already chosen a place outside. However, there are too many demonic insects in that place and they can't kill them all. Since you want to hone your skills, why don't you go there and help? Yuan Zhangqing bowed and said, if senior brother Wei needs help, I will do my best to help. At this moment, a letter flew in from outside the hall. Jing Yu went up to receive it and read it. He walked to Zhang Yan and said, Master, Chongyue True Temple sent a letter. They said that their sect is being attacked by a few demon saints, and they hope that I can help. Zhang Yan took the letter over and read it. His eyes flashed a little. When the sects established themselves on the sea, they had either chased or killed a few demonic beasts on the sea, and the enemies who were invading right now were the few that had escaped the net. Not long after, they actually dared to fight back. There was something fishy about this. He thought for a while, sneered and said, instruct Yen Yi and Tian Kun, tell them to immediately head to the sea to help. Chapter 1303. The 6 continents of the North Sea were originally the places of worship for the great sage Li Mian. Most of the continents were inhabited by mutant tribes, but there were also many people who had been abducted from the eastern wasteland. Ever since this great monster was scared away by the cultivators of the 9 continents, it fled to the south and had yet to return. After the Qinsong school occupied the frigid Jade Ocean region, the various sects also found a place to establish their foundations. Seeing that the 6 continents of the North Sea were vast, the Chongyue True Temple, the Dukhen sect, the Heavy Extension Temple, and the other sects came here to rebuild their sections. Because there were many demons on the sea, the leaders of the sects had specially invited several people from the heavenly abode to come and hold the fort. Not only did they wipe out all the demons, but they also killed or chased away several demon saints who wanted to fight for this place. However, no one from the 3 sects expected that in just 2 years, the demons that had escaped that day had returned. On the Qinghua continent, one of the 6 continents of the Northern Sea, was the mountain gate of the Chongyue True Temple. At this moment, outside the Grand Formation, there was a 3 kilometers long crimson-scaled flying fish that was ceaselessly ramming against the formation. Moreover, there were over 1 million fish demons of the same clan that were besieging it from the outside. They surged over like a tidal wave that left and returned without end, and when looked at from afar, it just happened to be like a mountain surrounded by flames. When the Chongyue True Temple was in the hands of Mi Jinren, under her deliberate influence, the aristocratic families in the sect had gradually declined over the past hundreds of years, and the former sect master also passed away after the realm was shifted. The current person in charge of the sect was called Lu Huidong, a Yuanying second-tier cultivator. He didn't expect that the sect would encounter such a crisis only a few years after he took over the position. At this moment, a series of rumbling sounds came from outside. The mountain peaks in the continent shook incessantly, and the temples also shook repeatedly. Creaking sounds came from the pillars. A young disciple looked at the boundless ocean waves outside the array and asked worriedly, Master, what's going on? These demons had been attacking for several days. If this went on, would the array be broken? Lu Huidong said with certainty, No, this formation was set up by those people from the heavens abode. It's not that easy to break. Although he said so, he secretly looked around and found that according to the strength of the fiendish demon's attacks, this formation could hold for at least another month. Unconsciously, he relaxed. By that time, reinforcements from the frigid Jade Ocean Prefecture would have already arrived. But for some reason, he felt that the demons had yet to unleash their full strength. The young disciple sighed and said, If only there was a king of cloud whales here, all of you would be able to rush over immediately and there would be no need to be afraid. Lu Huidong said in a deep voice, Relying on others to help is ultimately a bad idea. If Mi Jinren is here, how would these demons dare to attack us? Suddenly, a golden talisman flew into the formation. The young disciple waved his hand and took it. He opened it and took a look. He raised his head and said, Teacher, I have asked and understood. The Long Duration Monastery and the Crossing Earth sect were also attacked at about the same time, but they haven't suffered any major injuries up to the time of the report. Lu Huidong frowned. There's something strange about this. The young disciple was puzzled and asked, "Sect leader, what's wrong?" Lu Huidong said, "Why don't these demons gather together and attack one place? Wouldn't it be much easier to break the formation?" The young disciple said, "The demons of the mountain and sea realm are all barbaric people. Perhaps there's a rift between them and they can't work together?" Lu Huidong said, "No matter how barbaric the demons are, they are not stupid. Those who can cultivate to become demon sages are definitely not stupid. They've already made such a big fuss. What else can they not let go of? Perhaps there's some reason we can't see through. But that's good. When reinforcements come, At this point, his expression suddenly flickered and he spun around in place twice. With a serious expression, he said, "Could it be that these demons are planning to attack the reinforcements?" The young disciple was shocked and said, "If that's the case, then it's bad. Teacher, why don't you write a letter and tell them to be careful when they come to help?" Lu Huidong shook his head and said, "It's too late. The reinforcements are already on the way." He waved his hand again and said, "Don't worry. The person in charge of the various sects is Taoist Zhang, and even I can see that something is wrong. I don't think Taoist Zhang will easily fall into the enemy's trap." Tens of thousands of kilometers away from Chongyue True Temple, there were two demon sages standing together. Both of them had a jade horn on their foreheads. At a glance, anyone could tell that they were brothers of the same clan. These two were descendants of the Ox Flood Dragon. One of them was called Lu Yin, and the other was Lu Tsujiao. As flood dragons, they could be considered to be blessed by the heavens. They didn't need to cultivate. As long as they had a lifespan of 7,000 or 8,000 years, they would naturally reach the demon sage realm. A flash of light came from the sky. When it got closer, they saw that it was a bird about a zhang in size. It landed in front of the two people and spat out a silk letter. Lu Yin took it and said, "Good, it's just as Ancestor expected. It's Lu and Tian, two people who came to help." He casually destroyed the silk letter and said with a smile, "Rumor has it that these two are the disciples of the current cultivators of the 9 continents. As long as we can capture them, not only can we give them an explanation, but we can also make them worry." Lu Tsujiao said weakly, "Those cultivators from beyond the heavens have nothing to do with me. Is it really necessary to offend them?" Lu Yin glanced at him and said, "Why would we offend them? Just because the upper realm can help Ancestor ascend to beyond the heavens, and they want to deal with the cultivators from beyond the heavens. This reason alone is enough for us to take action." Lu Tsujiao said, "There are also powerful figures among those cultivators from beyond the heavens. I heard that their abilities are no less than that of the demon Ancestor. Don't be careless and get yourself killed instead." Lu Yin spat and said angrily, "Don't say such unlucky words." Lu Tsujiao said slowly, "Isn't that the case? Now that the cultivators of the 9 continents are staring at those heavenly ghosts and sharpening their knives, our clan just had to go there at this time. Aren't we just blocking the knives for the heavenly ghosts?" Lu Yin snorted and said, "Do you think Ancestor won't leave a way out? After capturing these two, we can explain to the upper realm. If they don't teach us the method to break through the realms, we can just let them go. That way, we won't have to completely fall out with the cultivators from beyond the heavens." At this moment, above the sea, Lu Yenyi and Tian Kun were riding the crossing light toward the 6 continents of the North Sea. In the past few years, they had swept away the demons and foreign species that refused to submit. They even went deep into the northern lands and fought with many demon saints. Their combat ability was no longer comparable to when they first formed their heavenly abode. In the beginning, the two of them could not completely control their magic power, so they often joined forces to fight the enemy. A year later, their strength had greatly increased, so they split up. After receiving the order from Zhang Yan, the two of them knew that there was probably more than one demon saint. To be cautious, they met up near Pengyuan sect and rushed to the 6 continents of the North Sea together. A few days later, the two of them gradually approached the westernmost Su Feng continent of the 6 continents. This was the place occupied by Yenzhong Monastery. The clear light dispersed, and the two of them appeared. Lu Yinyi was dressed in white, and her hair was tied up by a silver ring. She stepped on a clear wave, and there was water flowing around her. On the other hand, Tian Kun stood there, his body wrapped in yellow light, and there were whistling stones and sand flying around him. The two of them looked at the continent and saw a three-headed strange bird in the distance. It was leading an overwhelming flock of birds to besiege the formation. Lu Yinyi's face was solemn, and she said, "Junior brother, this is the great sage of Peaceful Feather. It's good at escaping. The few spiritual masters from before were also able to stop it. If we miss and let it escape, there will be endless trouble in the future." Tian Kun said in a deep voice, "Later, I will attack with all my strength and use my supernatural power to stop it. Senior sister, you may be able to take this demon down from the side." Lu Yinyi lightly nodded and was just about to agree when she suddenly sensed a wave of strangeness. She turned her gaze and saw two monsters that seemed to have the head of a bull and the body of a WM were flying over from afar while riding on roiling black winds. Just by standing here, she could feel the scorching vital energy assaulting her face. Lu Yin saw the two of them and said excitedly, "Chu Jiao, they are here. Quickly call the three great sages." Lu Chu Jiao turned into a human, took out a horn, and blew it toward the sky. At this time, Hungong Great Sage, who was attacking Chong Yu True Temple, and Jade Jaw Great Sage, who was attacking Duchen Sect, heard the sound and immediately stopped, turned around, and flew toward where they were. After Lu Chu Jiao blew it, he threw away the horn, turned into a bull dragon, and rushed up with Lu Yin. According to the plan, they would first entangle the two cultivators from beyond the heavens, and then the demon saints who were attacking the three sects would also gather here. With the power of 5 people against 2, the odds of winning were very high. Moreover, they were not afraid of failure. The old ancestor of the Bull Dragon clan attached great importance to this matter, and was hiding outside and watching. If the 5 of them were no match for the 2, he would personally capture them. Tian Kun immediately stood in front of them and revealed his Dharma form. A towering mountain appeared out of thin air above the sea, and a heavy aura emanated from it, causing the waves to stop. Then he reached out his hand in front of him. The Lu brothers suddenly felt their bodies sink, as if they were carrying several mountains on their backs. The two of them stimulated their qi and blood, shouted loudly, and pushed their bodies thousands of feet away. In an instant, the demonic wind rolled, and the waves on the sea surged. With a rumbling sound, the waves below seemed to be attracted by an invisible force. In an instant, the waves rushed up and pulled the two of them in. Just a turn, they felt dizzy. At the same time, there was a huge force coming from the waves in all directions, constantly pressing down on their bodies. They couldn't help but roar in anger. They desperately wanted to rush out, but they couldn't do it no matter how hard they tried. At this moment, a black wind fell, easily broke through the waves, and swept them out. The two of them were shocked, and then they heard a gentle voice, "Don't struggle." Lu Yin said with surprise, "Old ancestor?" Only then did he feel relieved, and then he asked doubtfully, "Old ancestor, did something happen?" Just now, although they were at a disadvantage as soon as they met, it was not that they did not have the power to fight back. Moreover, instead of saving them, why not capture the two of them? The gentle voice said, "The person in charge of the extraterrestrial cultivators should have seen through my arrangements, and just now, he is also here. This person is very powerful, and just now I have not been awake for long, so I am not his match. Since things are not going well, it is best for us to retreat." Lu Xiujiao suddenly sighed. Seeing him like this, Lu Yin comforted him, "Brother, don't be discouraged. This time, we did not determine the winner, and it is only a temporary setback. Next time, we will fight again." Lu Xiujiao shook his head and said, "I am not sighing because of this." Lu Yin asked curiously, "Then why?" Lu Xiujiao sighed and said, "Speaking of which, the 3 beast saints were originally scared away by the extraterrestrial cultivators, and it was us 2 brothers who went to invite them back. Now that we left without saying a word, it seems that we have let them down." Chapter 1304. Zhang Yan had received the news that the 6 continents of the Northern Sea had been besieged earlier, and he felt that there was something strange about this matter. When he sent Lu Yenyi and Tian Kuan over, he went to the sky to watch. If there really was something behind this, he would be able to take care of it in time. 1cc. Just as he expected, not only did the opposite side set up a trap, but also a demon ancestor. If he was careless, he might fall into the trap. However, this demon ancestor did not seem to have a strong fighting spirit. After noticing his arrival, he decisively gathered his people and retreated. Zhang Yan watched the black wind go away indifferently from the void until it disappeared into the horizon. He did not chase after it. The situation of the enemy was not clear, and he still had 2 disciples here. It was not a good time to fight with this demon. However, just as Lu Tsujiao had said, they had left happily, but the 3 demon saints who had been left behind had fallen into an awkward situation. After seeing the Lu brothers being carried away by a ball of black wind, the 3 demons were slightly stunned, and they couldn't figure out what had happened. Demon Sage Pingling had always been quick-witted. Seeing that something was wrong, he immediately used his magical power and wanted to escape. However, Tian Kuan knew that he was good at escaping and had been watching him for a long time. Seeing that he was about to move, he used his magical power to lock him in place in the blink of an eye. Lu Yenyi saw that he moved, and according to the previous plan, she took out a spell, rolled up a huge tide, and pulled him in. Because she used the Northern Underworld water technique, Demon King Pingling's tendons and bones were about to break. He could not condense his qi and blood, and could not use his magical power at all. Great Sage Hengong and Eugene roared out madly when they saw this, and they immediately charged over and executed their respective divine abilities with the intention of rescuing him. This was not because the 3 demons were on good terms with each other, but because the 2 of them were not good at escaping. Last time, they only managed to escape with the help of the Great Sage of Peace Feather. Even if they had to consider their own lives, they could not abandon him. Lu Yenyi and Tian Kun also understood that Demon Sage Pingling was the key. At this time, they had already trapped the demon, and they were about to succeed. How could they let him escape? Lu Yenyi released the moonless sword pill. It turned into thousands of lights and fell. Although this sword had not been refined into a true artifact, the demonic saint was not a grotto heaven cultivator either. It did not have a dharma form that could easily reach thousands of miles. With a flash of light, the 2 of them were blocked halfway. 1cc. Demon Sage Hengong and Tian Kun also released a huge canopy. A ray of light landed on top of the 2 demonic beasts, causing their movements to become extremely slow. Under the countless sword lights, their flesh and blood flew everywhere. For a moment, they were in an extremely sorry state. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Lu Yenyi took out another golden chain and bound the flat feather demon sage. The demon immediately felt that the binding force on the chain was extremely strong, as if it was about to be minced into pieces. It was so shocked that it hurriedly circulated its qi and blood and shrunk its body. Soon, it retreated from 10,000 feet to 1,000 feet. But even so, it was still not as fast as the chains. Its muscles and bones were broken inch by inch, and its body was twisted like soft mud. However, the demon saint's body was incomparably strong, and it was constantly recovering. It couldn't take it anymore and howled, "Great Sage, please be merciful, please be merciful." Lu Yenyi's beautiful eyes fell as she said, "Turn into a human. That way, you won't have to suffer so much." The flat-plumed demonic saint didn't dare to show off and tried to transform into a human. As expected, the golden chain no longer restrained him. However, he could only use many of his supernatural powers when he was in his demonic form. It was equivalent to completely losing the ability to resist. After dealing with this big demon, Lu Yenyi turned around to help Tian Kuan. The 2 demon saints, Hengong and Eugene, were restrained by the treasures, so they could only use 40 to 50% of their abilities. They were already at a disadvantage, so they were captured after a few rounds. The 2 of them locked onto the 3 different golden locks, and then swept them up before flying towards an island. At this moment, Zhang Yan had already descended from the void and stood on the peak of a mountain. The two of them arrived in front of him and bowed. They said, "Master, the 3 fiendish demons that attacked the North Continent have been captured here. I don't know what to do with them." Zhang Yan raised his hand, and Lu Yenyi and Tian Kun walked up and stood behind him. They then looked at the 3 demons. After being tortured for a while, Peaceful Feather Great Sage already knew the power of extraterrestrial cultivators. At this moment, when he was in front of Zhang Yan, he felt the pressure of qi and blood that made him have no intention of resisting. He was even more frightened. He half knelt on the ground and shivered. 1cc Hengong demonic saint wasn't any better. His body was trembling, and he was cursing the Lu brothers in his heart. Only Eugene Demon Sage, even though he was lying down under the pressure, kept cursing as if he was not convinced. Zhang Yan smiled and flicked his finger at Eugene Demon Sage, injecting a stream of essence qi into him. The demon's body suddenly swelled up as if it was inflated, and then his qi and blood exploded with a bang, bursting into pieces of flesh and blood. In the blink of an eye, there was nothing left of him. The 2 demon saints, Demon Sage Ping Ling and Hingong, were scared out of their wits. They both said, spare us, great sage." Zhang Yan looked down and said, "I have something to ask you." Demon Sage Ping Ling touched his forehead and said, "Great sage, please ask. As long as I know, I can tell you." Zhang Yan said, "Let me ask you, who are the 2 people who escaped just now?" Demon Sage Ping Ling said, "They are the Chu brothers. They come from the Shang tribe in the 100 South Sea continent. Most of the people in this tribe are from the water tribe, but the leader is a bull dragon, which is a branch of the dragon species. It has the ability to calm the sea and swallow giant whales. It is very famous in the 100 South Sea continent. After I was expelled by you last time, I was lucky to escape with my life. I didn't want to come back, but the Chu brothers came to me and threatened me with benefits and wanted me to serve them. I was forced to go against you, but it was not my original intention." Zhang Yan ignored what he said and asked again, "The 100 South Sea continent is hundreds of millions of miles away from here. Aren't you demons of the North Sea? How do you know so much about this tribe?" Great Sage Hengong said, "To tell you the truth, we are living beings of the 100 South Sea continent. We are the vassals of the Bull Dragon tribe. More than 1,000 years ago, we were ordered by our king to hide here and invade the land. But the Great Sage Glass Puppet was very powerful, so we didn't dare to fight with it. Only when it moved away for some reason did we dare to come and snatch it." Zhang Yan's thoughts changed. The sects of the 9 continents and the Heavenly Ghost tribe were fighting each other, and the demons of the 100 South Sea continent came out to cause trouble at this time. It would be too much of a coincidence if no one intervened. He said, "I heard that 10,000 years ago, the 100 South Sea continent had a heavenly fire. Do you know about it?" Great Sage Ping Ling hurriedly said, I know. This is also a big event. Legend has it that a divine object fell from the heavens that year. The 2 demon patriarchs of the 100 South Sea continent fought over it and woke up from their slumber. After a great battle, the object was taken by the demon patriarch of the Shang tribe. After the demon patriarch of the Painting Elephant tribe was defeated, his fleshly body was split into dozens of pieces, which were suppressed in different continents. It was also because of his qi and blood that the living beings of the 100 South Sea continent gradually flourished. Hengong Great Sage also said, "I can prove that Flat Feather Monster King's words are true. If Great Sage doesn't believe me, you can go to South Civ 100 continents. This isn't a secret, so it's easy to find out." Zhang Yan thought about it. If what the 2 demons said was true, then the Bull Dragon tribe of the 100 South Sea continent was most likely a pawn of the power from beyond the heavens. Up until now, he had been on guard against the power from beyond interfering in the struggles of the mountain and sea realm. But now it was clear that, at least for the time being, they had no way to deal with them. They could only rely on the natives of the mountain and sea realm to cause trouble. This power has been plotting in the mountain and sea realm for tens of thousands of years, he thought, and they paid a huge price. They don't just regard this place as a lower realm. They must have a deeper purpose. It seems I need to flatten the Heavenly Ghost tribe as quickly as possible and establish a solid foundation in the mountain and sea realm. Only then will I have time to deal with them. After some thought, he turned to his 2 disciples and said, "Take these 3 demons and follow Master back to the sect." Lu Yinyi and Tian Kun nodded in agreement. Zhang Yan flicked his sleeve, and a stream of Xian Qi rose up from beneath his feet, which lifted everyone up into the air. Thanks to his magical power, it only took a day for them to return to the frigid Jade Sea Prefecture. After landing in front of the Temple of Purity Truth, he gave some instructions to his 2 disciples, then flew up into the air toward the Void Sky Prefecture. After the war, there was no further commotion in the mountain and sea realm. It was as if all of the various powers had quieted down. Time passed, and in the blink of an eye, 60 years had passed. In the Temple of Purity Truth, Zhang Yan sat cross-legged in meditation. Because he had recently sensed that his opportunity to break through to the next level was near, he had decided to stay in the mountain and sea realm and not go out to collect energy. The further he went, the more difficult it would be to break through. According to his calculations, if it weren't for the help of Pure Violet's spiritual opportunity, it would have taken him 10 times longer. In the 9 continents, even if someone reached his level of cultivation, they would most likely have reached the pinnacle and would not be able to go any further. At this point, the sound of a bell could be heard outside the Immortal's cave. He left his meditation, opened his eyes, and asked, "What is it?" "Master," Jingyu replied, "Tao Jinren has sent a letter saying that a living creature has been born in the heavenly furnace. He invites you to come and take a look." Zhang Yan was a bit surprised and thought, could it be that Tao Jinren has already finished refining? It's a lot faster than before. He flicked his sleeve, opened the portal, and stepped out. In the next moment, he was in the middle of the earthly fire heavenly furnace. Tao Jinren was sitting on the refining platform. When he saw Zhang Yan, he stood up and bowed. "Greetings, Taoist Zhang." Zhang Yan pointed at him and said with a smile, "I heard that Taoist Zhang made some progress?" Tao Jinren took a step to the side and made an inviting gesture. "Taoist Zhang, please come and take a look." Zhang Yan nodded and followed him down the passageway of the furnace. After some time passed, they arrived in front of a cavern, which was covered by a crimson shield. Tao Jinren stood in front of him and used a spell to remove the restriction. The scene inside the cavern was revealed. Zhang Yan looked over and saw a monster that looked like a dragon lying on the ground. It was currently in a deep sleep. It was about 30 feet long and had a long and narrow mouth. Its body was like a snake's, half feather and half scale. It had 4 claws under its abdomen and a pair of strong wings on its back. At this moment, when it spread out, it occupied more than half of the area of the cave. Tao Jinren pointed and said, "I named this creature Frightening Dragon. It's one of the 3 living creatures that was born not long ago." Chapter 1305. Zhang Yan looked at the frightening dragon for a moment and said, "I see that this demon not only has qi and blood flowing in its body, but also changes in spiritual vigor. Fellow Taoist, did you combine the 2 techniques into one?" Halfway there, Zhang Yan heard a thunderous roar coming from below. When he reached the boundary, he saw a hole with a radius of a few miles. In it, a half-lion, half-dragon demon with tortoise feet and scorpion tail walked back and forth. Its head, face, and neck were covered with thick manes. When its body shook, it seemed like a ball of red and purple flame floated up, looking very powerful. That roar had come from the body of the demon. Tao Jinren said, "This demon is called Xiaolong. It can drive thunder and fire, control wind and qi. It is good at fighting head-on, and its roar can scare ghosts and spirits. If a cultivator obtains it, it can be used to guard the mountain gate and cave abode. If they travel outside, it is the same as having a protector." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "How does Jinren control these 3 demons, Jinren?" Tao Jinren replied, "Take a strand of its blood and give it to me to fuse with my heart using a secret technique. From then on, their lives are bound together. Not only can it decide life and death, but if the cultivator dies, the demon will also die." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "These 3 kinds of demon dragons have their own uses. I wonder how many can it give birth to in a day?" Tao Jinren replied, "The weaker the qi and blood of the demon dragons, the more they can give birth to. However, it needs a sufficient amount of qi and blood to support it. It is best if it is the body of a demon saint. For example, the demon dragons we see now can give birth to about 10 in a day. Zhang Yan said, "All these years, our disciples have been sweeping the lands and captured quite a number of demon saints. Later on, I can give the order for those who are unwilling to submit to be sent here to fight. You can order your disciples to bring these demon dragons with them." Tao Jinren was surprised and said, "Jinren Zhang, are you going to fight with the Heavenly Ghost tribe?" Zhang Yan said, "It's up to the two leaders to decide when to start the war. However, in recent years, the main force of the Heavenly Ghost has sent some scattered tribes into the North Continent. Although they aren't serious problems, we can't ignore them either. We can take this opportunity to clean them up and test the means of these demon dragons." After the Heaven Ghost tribe suffered a great loss last time, they had learned their lesson and did not dare to send the entire tribe over again. However, they did not stop moving either. Instead, they scattered the people of the tribe and sneaked into the northern chill abyss separately. In this way, even though their forces were scattered, they were able to avoid the danger of being annihilated. They were probably preparing to wait for the main group to arrive before heading out together. The northern heaven cold abyss was incomparably vast. Even if the Heavenly Ghost tribe had tens of millions of people, it would be like a stone thrown into the sea, unable to cause the slightest ripple. It was not an easy task to count them all. However, there were no demon sages among the heavenly ghosts, so they were not much of a threat to the sects of the 9 states. The first to bear the brunt of the attack were the demons of the western lands of the North Continent. Therefore, when Zhang Yan learned of this matter, he did not take any action. He only ordered the cultivators of the various sects to be on the lookout. However, now that he had these demon dragons, he could try to clean them up. After discussing the matter with Tao Jinren, Zhang Yan left the earth furnace and returned to the Temple of Crossing Truth to take his seat. Just now, a few more letters arrived. He picked them up and read them one by one. Most of them were news of the battles between the sects and the demons and devils of the mountain and sea realm. The demons and devils of the mountain and sea realm were too many to kill. Something like this happened every 10 days or half a month. After glancing at them a few times, he put them aside. However, one letter from the Eastern Wasteland nation caught his attention. In the past few years, demons and devils from the 100 continents of the southern Civ had constantly brought their clansmen to the north. Because the countries of the Eastern Wasteland were allies of the 9 continents, and because they had intercepted them halfway, the two sides had fought for more than 100 times. In the past, the forces of the Eastern Wasteland nations would have been scattered all over the place. But today, the palaces were protected by grand formations, and there were flying boats to and fro. Many mystic cultivators could gather in one place in a very short period of time. Therefore, not only were they not at a disadvantage, they were also beating the demons and devils into retreat. Zhang Yan turned to look at the map on the wall. It showed the current distribution of forces. It could be seen that over the past few decades, hundreds of heavenly ghost tribes had moved to the east of the western desolate domain. They could cross the chaotic magnetic chasm at any time. Therefore, the sects of the 9 states still had to guard against them. As long as the demon ancestor of the 100 southern continents did not make a move, it was not a big deal. However, if the demons and devils insisted on coming to the northern cold abyss, they actually did not need to tangle with the eastern wasteland divine kingdom. They could just take a detour. Although they had to cross the chaotic magnetic chasm, it would undoubtedly reduce their own casualties. Although they did not do so now, it did not mean that they would not do so in the future. When they were beaten badly in front of the cities of the eastern wasteland nations, they would most likely make the same choice. He asked, "Where is spiritual master Luo now?" Jingyu said, "I heard that he is still sweeping the demons and devils in the north." 60 years had passed, and the Qinsong school spiritual master had gained 2 more Grotto Heaven spiritual masters. Duda did not disappoint and achieved the Grotto Heaven after a few years of isolation. Luo Qingyu, on the other hand, achieved this state 40 years ago with the support of Zhang Yan. In order to master their own cultivation methods and supernatural powers as soon as possible, Both of them went out to look for demons and devils to fight. One of them went overseas, and the other chose to go to the north. Zhang Yan thought for a moment and said, "Later, pass down my order. Have Spiritual Master Luo set up a formation at the border between the southern 100 continent and the north continent to guard against the demons and devils from this place." Jing Yu bowed and said, "I understand." Zhang Yan picked up the last letter. This one was sent from the spiritual gate. After reading it, he suddenly became interested. In the letter, it said that the cultivators of the spiritual gate found a strange stone deep in the ground. No matter what it was, as long as it was placed within 3 feet of the stone, it would be swallowed and never to be seen again. The cultivators of the spiritual gate once caught a demon saint to test it, but it was almost swallowed by this strange stone. Because they did not know how to deal with this thing, they sent a letter to report it. Zhang Yan thought and thought, if it is really as the letter says, this strange stone can be considered a strange object. It might even be able to store Xianshu. It seems that I have to go and take a look myself. A month later, a handsome young cultivator landed in front of the earthly fire heavenly cauldron. He cupped his hands and said to the guard at the door, "Please inform Spiritual Master Tao that Han Zwicheng from the Xianyuan Utopia has come to see you." When the guard heard that he was under Zhang Yan, he did not dare to neglect him and immediately turned to report. After a while, he came back and said, "Spiritual Master Han, Tao Jinren invites you." Han Zwicheng thanked him and walked in. Just as he entered the heavenly cauldron, he saw a small beast that looked like a fox-cat jumping in front of him. It raised its upper body and called out to him twice before scurrying into a tunnel. When it reached there, it turned back and called out softly, as if it was urging him. Han Zwicheng's eyes lit up and he sincerely sighed. This should be the Hui dragon that Master mentioned. It is indeed full of spirituality. Tao Jinren's methods are really impressive. There were many living beings with spirituality in the world, but they were nurtured by heaven and earth and created by postnatal methods. This was extremely unusual. He followed the Hui dragon up and walked down the tunnel to a spacious cave hall. He saw Tao Jinren sitting on the altar, and below him were hundreds of demon dragons. Not only were there the Hui dragon that he had seen just now, there were also frightening dragons, howling dragons, and other demons that he had heard of before. There were also several types of dragons that he could not identify. At this moment, they were all lying on the ground, breathing heavily, as if they were in deep sleep. His gaze was immediately attracted, but he did not forget the important matter. He walked up to the altar and cupped his hands, saying, "Greetings to Tao Jinren." Tao Jinren said, "Martial Nephew Han, did you come here because of Spiritual Master Zhang's order?" Han Zwicheng sighed and said, "Yes, Master has already ordered me to take charge of the cleansing of the heavenly ghost tribe in the continent. This time I came to see if the number of demon dragons should be enough. Looking at it now, it is much more than what I expected." Tao Jinren smiled and said, "Spiritual Master Zhang previously sent over 6 demon saint corpses. With this kind of support, the evil creature in the middle of the month has given birth to a total of 315 demon dragons. Martial Nephew Han can summon all the disciples here and make a blood oath here before you can take them away." Chapter 1306. Northern Heaven Frigid Abyss. Inside the coiling Snake River Valley. The demons that had originally occupied this place had all been killed. A branch of Heaven Ghost tribe called the Momo clan had taken over this place. Because they were afraid of being targeted by the sects of the 9 continents, the great sages of the clan with great blood energies did not come with them. They were scattered, and there were about 1,000 or so people left here. At this time, furious roars of battle came from deep within the valley. The earth shook, and from time to time, large trees would fall as if there were enormous beings fighting inside. The chief of the Momo clan, Lao Modi, and a few clansmen were high up on a hill. He rubbed his chin as if waiting for the result. A long time later, the sounds gradually stopped. 2 giants walked out, but in the blink of an eye, their huge bodies gradually shrunk, and finally returned to the size of a normal person. Then they knelt down, and with their foreheads touching the ground, they said, "Head of the accounts, us 2 brothers have captured the monster." Lao Modi said, "Good. Men, give each of you 500 kilograms of blood medicine." The two were overjoyed and kowtowed. "Thank you, Tent Chief." Lao Modi gathered his blood energy and jumped down from the hill with his clansmen. When they arrived at the valley, they saw a dying giant beast. It had the body of a dog, the head of a dog, tiger skin, and fangs. It was fat and tall, and looked like a small hill even when it was lying there. However, it only looked slightly bigger. Just looking at its blood energy, it was at most the strength of an aperture-opening realm. A heaven ghoul exclaimed, "So this is the strange monster, fallen dust. I heard that if this monster returns to its ancestral body, it can blow out wind that can kill tens of thousands of living beings after 9 days and 9 nights. Lao Modi said disdainfully, "This is just the nonsense of ignorant people. This strange monster is not a descendant of Bo Bai or Bo Xian. How can it have such ability? Even if it was lucky enough to cultivate to demon sage, it is the end." The heaven ghouls present nodded in agreement. The heaven ghouls prided themselves as the descendants of Bo Bai and Bo Xian. They mostly looked down on the wild monsters. Lao Modi rubbed his chin and thought, according to the patriarch, the blood of this great monster should be enough to summon the fate-inspecting tower. He shook the empty pouch on his waist and took out the world reflection pagoda. He waved his hand and said, "Men, kill this demon. I want to start a blood sacrifice." Immediately, 4 of the Momo clan's disciples activated their divine abilities, and their bodies instantly grew to 1,000 feet tall. They walked forward and stood at the head and tail of the group. He lifted the fallen dust demon up into the air, then extended his claws and cut open its stomach, letting its blood and internal organs splatter all over the tower. After suffering such a grievous injury, the fallen dust monster that was originally on the verge of death seemed to have regained its final radiance. It let out a sharp cry and struggled violently. The 4 Momo brothers were caught off guard, and all of them were dragged to the ground by the force of the struggle, causing a mess. Seeing how much blood was wasted, Bai Modi said unhappily, "Send a few more to help. If you don't have enough vitality, I'll use you guys to make up the numbers." But at this moment, a rumbling sound came from outside, and the ground also trembled slightly. A clansman ran over in a panic and said, "Chief, there's another fallen dust demon coming this way." Bai Modi's eyes lit up, and instead of being alarmed, he said happily, I heard that fallen dust demons often have male and female companions. Looks like it's true. Let's capture that one too, and it will be enough for the world reflection pagoda." As he spoke, the sound got closer and closer, as if the fallen dust demon would reach them in a few breaths' time. Bai Modi waved his hand and said, "Leave a few to guard this place, the rest follow me." When he finished, he released his vitality and sprinted forward. The Momo clan's clansmen shouted in unison, and they followed him. Only one of them had a flicker in his eyes. While the others were not paying attention, he secretly retreated out of the valley alone. Seeing that there was no one around, he took out a talisman and threw it out. After watching it disappear into the clouds, he retreated and attacked the fallen dust demon with the others as if nothing had happened. This person was already occupied by Sima Quan's clone. Although he was far away from the main body, and they had lost contact, it did not stop him from sending messages to the cold Jade Ocean province. After the talisman flew out for more than 1,000 miles, it suddenly stopped, as if it was caught by something and fell down. At the same time, Han Zwicheng's figure appeared in the atmosphere, and behind him, there were many indistinct figures. All of the people present were, without exception, riding on frightening dragons. Han Zwicheng held the talisman and sensed for a while, then looked up in the direction of the coiling Snake Valley and said, "Those heavenly ghosts are not far ahead. Disciples, quickly follow me." He took a step and rode the shocking dragon into the air, heading towards the valley. Gradually, his body disappeared again, and the people behind him did the same. In just a short while, the group arrived above the mountain ridge. Looking down, they could see more than 100 heavenly ghosts fighting a strange-looking demon. They had come here not only to destroy this heavenly ghost settlement, but also to see the quality of those demon dragons. Along the way, the shocking dragon was really useful. Standing on the dragon's back, everyone could become invisible. Even if they did not deliberately restrain their aura, people with similar cultivation would not be able to detect their existence as long as they did not come within a few feet of them. Now that they needed to charge and break through enemy lines, they naturally had to release the roaring dragon. Hans Wiching took down the beast's subduing collar and cast it in the sky. In an instant, there was a flash of light, and a half-lion, half-dragon demon with turtle feet and scorpion tail appeared on the ground. With a roar, smoke rose from its hooves, and it rushed down. Seeing him do this, the disciples behind him also threw out the beast's subduing collars in their hands. In the entire valley, there was a deafening sound. Along with the roaring dragon came rolling thunder and blazing fire. Sensing the commotion, Momoti was shocked and cried out, "Weren't the demon tribes within 1,000 miles flattened? Why are there so many of them?" Every roaring dragon here was comparable to a spirit image mystic cultivator. Now, there were only about 30 of them, and the Momo tribesmen in front of them were either trampled into meat paste or swallowed by lightning and fire. Momoti was also frightened. He knew that most of his tribesmen would not be able to survive. But even if he wanted to escape, he had to think twice. The crime of falling into the World Inspection Tower was not something he could bear. He gritted his teeth and his chi and blood were stirred up. His eyes turned red and he jumped onto the World Reflection Tower. He stretched out his hand and grabbed. He gathered all the chi and blood in this place, no matter if they were from his clansmen or demons, and sprinkled them onto the tower. Instantly, the tower shook lightly. He was overjoyed. As long as this tower was activated, not only could it protect him, it could also be used to fight enemies. At this moment, a dragon suddenly appeared in the air behind him and silently bit towards his neck. Momoti felt something was wrong behind him. He reacted quickly and turned into a giant. He turned around and grabbed Hans Wiching. Just as he was about to kill Hans Wiching flicked his sleeve and threw out a golden red feather. With a flash of spiritual light, it pierced through Momoti's chest. Lao Mot cried out in pain. His movements slowed down. That shocking dragon twisted his neck, turned around and bit his head off. He was not a demonic beast saint after all. He could not recover to such a level. His headless body shook a few times and rolled down to the bottom of the tower. With the death of their leader, the remaining Momo clansmen were even less of a threat. In less than a dozen breaths, Xiao Long slaughtered them all and ate their corpses. Hans Wiching saw that there were no more Heaven Ghoul clansmen present, and then trapped Xiao Long in the beast trap. Then he ordered his disciples to look around and see if anyone had escaped. As for Sima Quan who had sent him the message, he had been warned beforehand not to expose this person. It was clear that Sima Quan had a way to escape, so he did not search for him. He walked to the front of the World Reflection Tower and walked around it. First, he waved his sleeves to get rid of the blood. Then he cast a few spells on it. The pagoda was affected by his mana and suddenly shook. He couldn't help but say happily, "It really works." He continued. An hour later, the World Inspection Tower gradually shrunk, and with another move, it fell into his sleeves. At this moment, almost all the disciples who were searching in all directions had returned. A cultivator who looked like an elder hurried to his side and said in a low voice, "Taoist master, the 2 disciples who were sent to the west to investigate encountered several poisonous insects and were injured. Even the antidote pills were useless. How should we deal with them?" Hans Wiching said in surprise, "How can this be? Didn't I tell them that this place is not like Frost Jade Sea Province? There are demons, and poisonous insects everywhere. Remember to keep Chua Long with you, and retreat as soon as possible if there is a warning?" The cultivator coughed and said, "Maybe we were too careless." Hans Wiching looked at his expression and seemed to understand something. He wanted to say something, but he held back and sighed, "Find someone to send them back." In order to control the demon dragon, he sent most of the people from Blue Feather Pavilion. However, many of them were Yen Xiaoyang's disciples, and they didn't care about his orders at all. He was soft-hearted to begin with, and he didn't want to scold them too much for Yen Siye's sake. At this time, a disciple shouted from afar, "Spiritual Master Han, we found a cloud whale in the lake in the distance." Hans Wiching became spirited and said, Take me to see it." After following the disciple for more than 30 miles to the north, he saw a cloud whale floating in a lake. As it inhaled and exhaled, a layer of fog appeared around it. A few disciples were eager to try. "Spiritual master, it should be brought here by those heavenly ghosts. Should we kill it?" Hans Wiching waved his hand to stop them and said, "I heard that the heavenly ghost tribe's cloud whales are like slaves. Since it has no control, there is no need to make things difficult for it. Who knows, we might be able to get some information from it." He waved his sleeve and released a chualong. He said a few words in a low voice, and the chualong nodded and flew towards the cloud whale with a whoosh. It easily got close to it and lay there, as if it was listening to something. After a while, the chualong turned around and let out a few soft cries. Hans Wiching was shocked and said, "What? That whale king also sneaked into the northern heaven cold abyss?" P.S. Chapter 1307. In the frigid Jade Sea region, there was a sudden rumble in the Xianzhe Sea region of the True Purification Palace. Because the entrance to the small world was not closed, the sound gradually spread outside and echoed in the sky above the frigid Jade Sea region. Even the clouds in the sky were scattered, revealing a clear sky. When the cultivators in the continent saw this scene, they could not help but exclaim in surprise. Over the past few decades, there had been people in the Dark Azure sect who had attained the heavenly abode, and there had also been a huge commotion. The others had all guessed which senior cultivator had attained perfection in his cultivation and actually produced such an unprecedented grand scene. Only some grotto heaven cultivators with profound cultivation had vaguely guessed something. In the main hall of the True Purification Palace, Zhang Yan was wearing a black robe and sitting on a jade platform. At this moment, the rumbling sound was coming from his body. At the same time, the surroundings of the palace were filled with mysterious chaotic xianqi, and the restrictions inside and outside the small world were trembling, as if they were under great pressure. After about a few hours, all the sounds suddenly stopped, and even the xianqi disappeared without a trace. The small world returned to how it was before. Zhang Yan opened his eyes, and in that instant, there seemed to be a burst of light. The entire world suddenly lit up, and behind him, there was also a flash of 5-colored divine light. At this moment, he had already broken through the 9th barrier. Since ancient times, there were very few cultivators who could reach this step. Not to mention those who came from outer space. Among the ancestors of the 9 continents, there were only 2 that could be found. And the reason why these 2 could reach this stage was not because their aptitude was better than the descendants, but because they had cultivated earlier, when the purple gas had not faded and the spirit was not lacking. When Zhang Yan withdrew the rising magic power, he could already clearly feel that after this, he could still break through the 3rd barrier. If he could pass it, he would immediately form an origin embryo. Then he could cultivate the superior Dao technique of shedding the mortal body. He adjusted his breathing for a moment and thought, "It's time to go to the abyss." After receiving the letter from the spirit gate, he wanted to go to the abyss, but he just felt that his opportunity had arrived. He had reached a critical moment in his cultivation, so he was delayed. Fortunately, it was an urgent matter. Even if the journey was delayed for a few days, it was not a big deal. He stood up from the praying mat and stepped into the formation door. When he arrived at the outer hall and looked out through the pillar, he saw a beautiful demon with bright and beautiful feathers spreading its wings, floating in the sky like a kite. Seeing that he had come out of his closed-door training, the demon's body gradually shrank. It flew into the hall and circled around him in a very intimate manner. Zhang Yan smiled. He could see that Zhang Yan's expression changed. Ever since the severed demon gained new life, it seemed to have gained a little more spirituality due to the nourishment of the sanguine aura. It became more and more like a living being. Jing Yu was originally on duty outside, but when he sensed him coming out of seclusion, he came in and bowed, "Master." "Zhang Yan, is there anything that needs to be reported?" Jing Yu replied, "There is one. Spiritual Master Han sent a letter. The 3 kinds of demon dragons are very useful, but they discovered that the heavenly ghost tribe actually moved a cloud whale king into the northern cold abyss. The Heavenly Ghost tribe actually moved a cloud whale king into the northern cold abyss, and they're currently searching for its whereabouts. Right now, Spiritual Master Han doesn't have enough manpower, so he wants to ask the sect to send more people over. Whale King. Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows. He knew that the Heavenly Ghost tribe had a cloud whale in the northern cold abyss. The 3 tribes that were destroyed had intended to come over, so they were transferred to the chaotic space domain by the Zhikong Beautiful map. However, he did not deliberately search for it. That was because the cloud whale had been silent in the northern cold abyss for a long time and did not have many offspring. Even if the Heavenly Ghost tribe sent more people over, there would not be many. Leaving it in the continent would just be another bait. Regarding this matter, before Han Zhuqiang left, he had also given instructions. Therefore, the Cloud Whale King mentioned this time was obviously another one. However, what he did not understand was that the Heavenly Ghost tribe had learned their lesson last time. They should know that using the Cloud Whale to move back and forth was a waste of effort and damage. So why did they still do it? From Sima Chuanhe, he learned that the master of the Heavenly Ghost tribe, Yaozhi, was not a short-sighted person. There must be a reason for this. He thought for a moment, and after a moment, his eyes flashed as he thought of a possibility. The Zhikong Beautiful map only separated the western absolute domain and the northern cold abyss. But if the Heavenly Ghost tribe did not pass through, and instead went around the other continents, there would not be such an obstruction. Previously, he had guessed why the demons of the 100 Southern Net continent kept moving north, but he could not be sure. But combining this matter, it suddenly became clear. On the surface, they wanted to attack the North Continent, but in reality, they were very likely to be a cover for the Heavenly Ghost tribe. It was likely that the tribes in front of the chaotic magnetic chasm were purposely placed there by the Heavenly Ghost tribe's ancestral tribe to cover their true goal. But in a war between 2 sides, any chess piece was useful. He believed that if this path was blocked, the other side's idle chess pieces could immediately turn into the main force. Zhang Yan smiled. The Heavenly Ghost tribe had made this move with great patience, and it was also very bold. He could conclude that there were not many Heavenly Ghost tribe members involved in this matter. Otherwise, Sima Chuanhe would have discovered something and there would have been news. It was probably for this reason that up until now, no large tribes had come to the continent. Since he knew their goal, the next step was easy. Right now, the key was the Whale King. Perhaps there was more than one that had come to the northern cold abyss. As long as he found all of them, he could cut off this matter from the source. After sorting out his thoughts, he said, I remember that Sage Sima's disciple called Feng Shen and was originally from the Southern Flower sect. Jingyu said, yes, although this person is Sage Sima's disciple, his cultivation method is from the Southern Flower sect. He is very good at controlling mausoleum beasts. Zhang Yan said, yes, let Feng Shen and go to help Zhuqiang. He can recruit the manpower he needs. As long as they are willing to go with him, he can deploy them. Also, is that Ban Xia demon saint still in the continent? Jingyu said, he is still in the prison. No one dares to deal with him without master's order. Zhang Yan said, bring this demon here. Jingyu said, this lowly one will go and deliver the order. About an hour later, Ban Xia demon saint came to the hall trembling with fear. He transformed into his human form and learned the etiquette of the 9 continents. He kowtowed and said, this lowly demon greets Sage. Since he was captured, he had been imprisoned in the cold Jade Sea province. Later, when he heard that several other demon sages were taken to be fed to a ferocious beast, he was afraid that he would also end up like them. Zhang Yan looked at him and said, fellow Taoist Ban Xia, I remember that you once said that you have a lot of cloud-refined insects under your command. They can drill into mountains and enter the ground, swim across the sea and rivers, and go to many dangerous places. Is that so? Ban Xia Demon Saint said, yes, this lowly demon did not exaggerate. Zhang Yan said again, you have been captured for more than 70 years. Can these cloud-refined insects still be used? Ban Xia Demon Saint said, reporting to Sage, these cloud-refined insects only listen to this lowly demon's command. They will not be taken away by others. Even if they all die, if this lowly demon does not hesitate to use his blood essence, he can still raise more. Originally, with his ability, it was the most convenient to use him to find treasured medicines, but how could the cultivators of the 9 continents entrust him with such a big matter related to their own cultivation? They would rather keep him in captivity than trust him. Zhang Yan said, "Now there is a matter that can use your ability. If it is done well, you can be free." Jingyu said, "Now in the northern heaven cold abyss, there is a cloud whale sent here by the heavenly ghost tribe. Can you find it?" When Banxia Demon Saint heard this, he patted his chest and said, "Sage can rest assured. Leave this matter to this lowly demon, I will definitely be able to do it safely, but," Zhang Yan said, "if there is any difficulty, you can say it." Banxia Demon Saint hurriedly said, "It is not that there is a difficulty. May I ask Sage, if this matter is done well, can this lowly demon enter the sect?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "You want to enter my Qinsong school? My Qinsong school does not accept demons as disciples, but if you really make a contribution, it is not impossible to be a deacon guarding the cave." Banxia Demon Saint was overjoyed and repeatedly kowtowed. Zhang Yan waved his sleeves and ordered Jingyu to take him away, while he himself left the Duzhen Palace and rode a ray of light to the southwest earth abyss. On the way, he used the void several times, and after a few hours, he arrived in front of the pure Yin barrier formation. Then, he turned into a ray of light and descended. When he came, he did not deliberately conceal his aura, and his momentum was extremely great. When Yuan Hongyang and the other cultivators of the spiritual gate sensed his arrival, they all came out to greet him. After greeting him outside the door, they invited him into the palace. After some questioning, they learned that he was here to deal with the strange stone. Yuan Hongyang said, "No one can touch this stone. It is now in the 6th layer of the earth abyss. I will have to trouble Sage to personally go there." Zhang Yan made an "oh" sound and said, "The 6th floor?" When Qingxiang came out and explained, "After we occupied this place, we found that the earth abyss is divided into many layers, and the bottom is endless. The Shanyang clan has only occupied the top 4 layers for thousands of years. In order to prevent any strange things from happening below, we sent our disciples down to investigate, and it was at the 6th layer that we found this strange stone. At that time, 2 disciples were accidentally sucked into the stone, and they never came out again. Later on, we tried to test it, but we could not do anything to this stone." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "There is indeed something strange about it." He stood up from his seat and said, "Let me go and take a look." The rest of the Zenrins also stood up. Yuan Hongyang took out a spell and opened up an array door in the hall. He said, "Go through this, and you will reach the location of the strange stone. Sage Zhang, please." Zhang Yan shook his sleeves and strode over. After stepping out of the array door, he looked up and found himself at the bottom of a ravine. There were jagged rocks everywhere, and the plants around him were all grayish-white. Not far in front of him, there was a diamond-shaped strange stone floating in the air. It was about 10 feet in size and 3 feet off the ground. He stared at it for a moment and his eyes lit up. He walked forward. However, as he got closer, the strange stone seemed to have sensed a great threat and began to vibrate. Then, a white and yellow light bloomed from the stone. Zhang Yan smiled. Now he could be sure that this thing looked like a stone on the surface, but it was actually a living thing. Chapter 1308. As Zhang Yan got closer, the strange stone shook violently under the pressure of the majestic qi emanating from his body. After Zhang Yan arrived a meter away from the stone, he didn't continue forward, and then he started walking around the stone. After sensing it for a short moment, his eyes narrowed. The vital energy of this object was mottled and aged, and it was muddy like smoke. Thus, he was able to determine that it was created artificially. Objects that were created naturally had a pure vital energy that wasn't evil or impure, and it absolutely didn't look like this. This wasn't to say that things with clear and upright qi were born innately, but anything with impure qi could be determined to be acquired after birth. With a flick of his finger, the 2 bloodstones flew toward the strange stone. However, when they were 3 feet away from the stone, they seemed to be pulled by an invisible force and slowly sank into the stone. Finally, they disappeared. There was a flash of light in the matrix door, and when Qingxiang also walked in at this time. When he saw this scene, he said, "Jinren Zhang, we have tried many times before. This stone can swallow almost anything, including mana. Cultivators in the heavenly abode can still withdraw in time, but under this realm, they will be dragged in together." Zhang Yan shook his head and smiled. This stone may be able to absorb the mana of the cultivators of paradise, but it may not be able to swallow them all at once. When Qingxiang thought for a moment and said, "Jinren Zhang, are you saying that this stone was just bluffing before and actually does not have the ability to absorb us?" Zhang Yan smiled. "Whether it is true or not, we will know once we catch a demon saint and throw it over." When Qingxiang said, "That is easy. Let me go get one." There were a few tribes of monsters and demons around the abyss. They were originally subjects of the Shanyang clan, but they were later purged by the Ling Gate. Until now, there were still 2 demon saints imprisoned here. However, at this moment, the strange stone suddenly trembled and actually rose into the air in front of the 2, swaying and drifting towards the top of the cliff. It looked like it was escaping. When Qingxiang said, "Zhenren?" Zhang Yan looked up and said, "Don't worry, let's see where he's going." With a tap of his foot, a clear qi enveloped his body. He slowly flew up into the sky. Wen Qingxiang was wrapped in a bloody light as he followed. He didn't know how high the cliff was. After climbing for about 10 li, he still couldn't see the top. At this moment, the strange stone flashed and suddenly disappeared. Zhang Yan could clearly see that there was a 100-foot-wide cave on the mountain wall and the strange rock was hiding in it. After arriving at the entrance of the cave, he scanned it with his divine will and said, "Sage One, did you find this place when you were investigating earlier?" Enlightened Master Wen said, "A disciple went around to check, but there are many caves here. There are thousands of them. Perhaps I didn't notice them before." Zhang Yan considered for a moment and said, "Jinren Wen, please wait here, I'll go in and take a look." When Qingxiang cupped his hands and said, "If Jinren has any orders, please call me at any time." Zhang Yan nodded his head, then stepped on the cloud and entered, following the strange stone's aura. The terrain of the cave was not winding but very flat. It could be seen that it was dug by humans. Although the cave walls had become rough and rough due to the passage of time and the erosion of wind and water, it was still generally flat. He flew for hundreds of li in a row and did not encounter any obstacles. As he went deeper, there were many strangely shaped bones on the ground and many broken weapons. It was obvious that there had been a great battle here. At this moment, his heart skipped a beat. According to Enlightened Master Wen, the strange rock swallowed everything, but it did not touch these bones. Moreover, it ran all the way here. It could be imagined that there must be a connection between the two. After a while, he finally reached the end of the cave. A ray of light shone in from the outside. He stepped on the cloud and looked down. Below him was a clear lake surrounded by green plants. There was a light wheel hanging on the top, illuminating the surroundings. At first glance, he thought that he was on the surface. That strange rock was currently floating towards an island in the middle of the lake. There were many collapsed pillars there, and in the center, there was a platform. It was pure gold, and it was incomparably dazzling. Anyone who came here would be able to see it at first glance. Beneath the altar were countless enormous skeletons, and they were similar to the skeletons they'd seen on the way here. They seemed to be complete, but they had strange appearances. All of them had the lower body of a snake, the upper body of a human, and a pair of sharp horns on top of their heads. Zhang Yan's gaze swept across the area again. Seeing that there was no existence of anything similar to a prohibition formation, and the spiritual vigor was very peaceful, he turned into a light and flew across the lake, landing directly on the island. At this moment, the strange stone had already reached the top of the platform and stopped there, no longer moving. He was not in a hurry to go forward. Instead, he looked around. The outer edge of the island was filled with broken stone slabs, and there were many strange words carved on them. With a turn of his spirit, he memorized all these words. Unfortunately, these were not erosion inscriptions, but man-made. Otherwise, it would not be difficult to understand the meaning of these words. He quickly reached the bottom of the altar and walked up the stone steps. At this moment, there were some changes in the spiritual vigor around the strange rock. He could feel that there was a spiritual vigor gathering. After a while, it released a bright light that shone on the entire island. When Zhang Yan looked again, he saw dozens of people with 2 horns on their heads appearing on the altar. Among them, there was a majestic person with a snake's body that was 100 feet tall. It could be seen that he was a noble of the clan. He wore golden armor and jade plates, and behind him was an exquisitely woven ribbon with gorgeous wings. He wore a silver helmet on his head, and there was an eye between his eyebrows that was moving slightly. However, it was not born by himself, but was dug out from somewhere else and embedded on it. The guards on the platform seemed to have noticed Zhang Yan's presence and shouted at him. The leader of the people with a snake's body pointed downwards, and suddenly many rushed down, raised their spears high, and poked him in the chest. Zhang Yan looked indifferently and did not care at all. He continued to go up, letting the people with a snake's body do whatever they wanted. However, in the next moment, they passed through his body and disappeared. These were just illusions created by the spiritual vigor. Moreover, unless it was a cultivator or a great demon of the same realm as him, they would not be able to stand firmly in front of him. He could kill them with just his chi dynamic, so how could they possibly attack him? After a while, he reached the top of the altar. At this moment, the illusion changed again. The noble with a snake's body that looked like a witch faced the strange rock, kneeling on the ground and chanting prayers. Countless people with half their bodies in the snake's body surrounded the altar and kowtowed. Not long after, dozens of servants carried a 2-headed, 4-armed, 1-eyed, and 3-legged giant up the altar. They chopped off its head with a sharp axe and poured its blood on the strange rock. After this scene, another scene appeared, followed by the next one. However, regardless of the attire or the people, they all became more and more ancient. Zhang Yan looked on calmly. This should be the scene from tens of thousands of years ago, but it was reenacted by the strange rock using some unknown method. After looking at it for a long time, he had a general idea of what was going on, and thought to himself, so it has such an origin. This trip was not made in vain. Most of the demons, devils, and outsiders that lived on the surface of the mountain and sea realm had evolved from the primordial starlight. Whether or not they were related, most of the tribes recognized Bo Bai and Bo Xian as their ancestors. This tribe of people with a snake's body was called the Buju tribe, and they had nothing to do with the planets beyond the heavens. They were the true natives of the mountain and sea realm. According to the living beings of the realm, the Buju tribe was a spirit that was born after Yuan Bo incarnated into heaven and earth. They had been powerful for a time, and not only was the Earth Abyss within their territory, they even occupied a part of the frigid North Abyss. However, 20 or 30,000 years ago, a subterranean demonic insect invaded their tribe and nearly wiped them out. In order to deal with the demonic insect, the leader of the Buju tribe jumped into a furnace and sacrificed himself. He used a strange jade to temper his body, and in the end, he transformed it into a devouring stone, which he used to block the demonic insect. However, one devouring stone wasn't enough. In order to ensure the survival of the tribe, the elders of the tribe followed suit and forged more than 2,000 devouring stones to guard various areas of the Earth Abyss. From then on, as long as they were protected by the spiritual light of the devouring stone, they would no longer have to fear the demonic insect. Originally, after resolving the crisis, the Buju tribe would have had a few thousand years to recover, and it wouldn't have been difficult for them to rise again. Unfortunately, as the demons, devils, and outsiders on the surface of the Earth Abyss rose, a tribe called the Tung people were defeated, and under the leadership of their leader, they invaded the Earth Abyss. As the Buju tribe occupied almost all the good areas in the upper 3 levels of the Earth Abyss, there was an inevitable conflict between the two tribes, and it evolved into a war between the two tribes. However, by then, the Buju tribe had lost all of their combat power, and the devouring stone couldn't fight against the leader of the Trung tribe, who was almost as powerful as the demon ancestor. In the end, they had to stake everything on one throw, and put all the devouring stones in one place. Tens of thousands of tribe members sacrificed themselves to forge one devouring stone, and this stone severely injured the Ting people. This war could be said to be a lose-lose, and the remaining people of the two tribes lost their inheritance. When the Shanyang tribe arrived, the remaining people of the two tribes were already like beasts. Looking at the strange stone on the altar, Zhang Yan pondered, "Seems like this stone is the devouring stone that day. It should have been absorbing the spiritual vigor of the world over the past tens of thousands of years, and then gradually developed its own consciousness." But according to the Buju tribe's records, at that time, it was because of an unknown refined jade, and relying on it, it was able to forge this devouring stone. This item could be called a real treasure, and if it could be taken back, it would be enough to carry the Xian technique. However, it was located in the depths of the earth abyss, and in the tens of levels, it was extremely dangerous. Zhang Yan's eyes flickered, and he said, "You do have some spiritual wisdom. Showing me all of this is to make me abandon you and find the refined stone. It's best if you lose it down there, then you can protect yourself, am I right?" The devouring stone couldn't help but tremble slightly. Zhang Yan smiled, waved his sleeves, and took a few steps forward. Then he pointed at the devouring stone. Chapter 1309. Zhang Yan pointed at the swallow stone. The stone's consciousness retreated and didn't dare to move at all. It could swallow anything in the outside world, but in front of him, it was very obedient. Zhang Yan was surprised. If the devouring stone had the slightest intention to resist, he would have wiped away that strand of consciousness. Since it was very tactful, then there was no need to be so intense. He released his mana and it turned into countless spell scrolls that danced in the air. Then they entered the stone and with a turn, there was a flash of lightning on his body. That place was his own territory. Even if the devouring stone had 1,000 abilities, it would not be able to display them. Next, he could go find the refined jade. Just now, the swallow stone had shown him many ancient scenes. He more or less knew where to go to find it. However, he had to pass through 10 levels of the earth abyss. If he searched step by step, it would take too much time. Plus, tens of thousands of years had passed and it might not be in the same place anymore. If it was a normal cultivator, they wouldn't be able to think of anything else, but he didn't need to. He threw out dozens of array flags to protect himself. He then made a talisman and sent it to Wen Qingxiang. He told him what he wanted to do and then sat cross-legged on the altar. After a while, a demonic image appeared behind him. Under the use of his mana, his body grew taller and taller. Very quickly he went up. However, his body was like a shadow and the rocks couldn't stop him at all. He passed through them easily. As the demonic image grew larger, it soon reached the top of the earth abyss. It continued to grow until it was almost out of the air barrier. Then, it stopped and pressed down with its palm. This scene was like the sky falling. The disciples of the Ling sect saw it and were shocked and terrified. In the main hall of the Nether Spring sect, a disciple rushed into the hall. His face was full of worry and anxiety. He said, "Sect leader, bad news." But when he looked up, he was startled. He saw Yuan Hongyang standing in the hall with his hands behind his back. He was quietly looking up and said without turning his head, "Pass on my orders. This is Zhang Zhenren using his technique. He won't hurt us, so there's no need to panic." At this moment, the various sects of the spirit sect. He also made a corresponding move, ordering his disciples to keep to their positions. While the perfected ones from the spiritual sect were marveling at Zhang Yan's magic power, they were also thinking about what was in the earth abyss that was worth such a huge commotion. In less than a dozen breaths, the palm descended. Even though they had already been informed and the disciples of the spirit gate were already prepared, when they saw the huge palm pressing down, as if they would be smashed into pieces in the next moment, most of them could not help but tremble. Unable to control themselves, many of the weaker cultivators couldn't help but get up and flee. However, what would come would come. When the palm passed through their bodies, some of them couldn't help but tremble, Some of their faces turned pale, and there were even some who cried out. But without exception, all of them felt as if they had escaped from the line between life and death. But it was precisely because of this that many of the disciples calmed down. However, he faintly felt that he had broken through a barrier and gained something. After the huge palm fell down, it instantly turned from illusory to solid, and then pierced through 10 levels of the earth abyss. And wherever it passed, be it demonic poison, beasts, or monsters, they were all killed by the shock. After a long time, the demonic image slowly dissipated. When Zhang Yan opened his eyes, there was already a piece of white and flawless jade in his palm. It was a beautiful round ball of jade. The one that Bu Gosher found back then also looked like this, but it was much smaller than the one in front of him. He tried to inject a bit of magic power into it, but the jade had no reaction, as if it was a bottomless abyss that could contain an endless amount of energy. He praised, "It is indeed a natural spiritual object. Using this to carry Xian techniques, maybe it can be used a few times." Most treasures, spiritual objects, or formations usually could only carry Xian techniques once. But if it was a treasure that was truly born from the Weili of nature, it could be used repeatedly until its foundation was exhausted. After obtaining the refined jade, he had no intention of staying here any longer. He rose into the air and flew upwards. Seeing him coming out of the cave, when Qingxiang bowed and said, "Zhenren Zhang." Zhang Yan said, "I have already kept the strange stone, and also cleaned up the demons within the 10th level. Within 100 years, they will not be able to cause trouble to you." When Qingxiang was slightly surprised, but then he was overjoyed. Although the demons below were endless, as long as he built an array altar below and guarded the door that connected the worlds, there was no need to worry about them coming up. In this way, the boundary of the Ling Gate would be expanded several times. He bowed solemnly and said, "Thank you, Zhenren." But Zhang Yan said with a deeper meaning, "No need to thank me. Just be careful in the future." This time, with one strike of his palm, he had killed countless monsters. But at the same time, he also felt that it would not be easy to go further down the earth abyss. So he left a trace of qi. If there was any strange movement, he would immediately be aware. When Qingxiang was startled, his mind worked quickly and he immediately understood the meaning of those words. His heart shuddered and he said seriously, "I will remember." The two left the array door and went to the upper level of the earth abyss. Zhang Yan looked at the sky and said, "There is still something to do in the mountain gate. Zhenren, please inform the Zhenren of the other sections. I will take my leave now." When Qingxiang said he did not dare, then he saw Zhang Yan turn into a beam of light and fly away. Thinking of what he said just now, his expression became more solemn. He turned around and turned into a beam of blood light, flying towards the palace. At this moment, in the Frost Jade Ocean Prefecture, Fong Sinan immediately started recruiting people after receiving the order. He was currently cultivating under the Clear Feather sect and had made many friends. Coupled with the fact that he had mingled with independent cultivators before, he knew many people as well. Relying on his friendship and enticement, he quickly gathered over 100 people. However, this was not enough, so he went to a few small sects and promised all sorts of conditions. When he was cultivating in the Dark Een Sky Palace, many of his peers came from these sections. He knew a little about the situation in these sects and knew that as long as he promised them benefits, it would be difficult to recruit more people. Just as he expected, in less than 2 months, he gained more than 100 people. In this period of time, he took the opportunity to visit the Whale King Yunzhu. Not only did he learn about the cloud whale's preferences and temperament, but he also figured out the genealogy of its race. Then he brought the hundreds of newly born dragon demons into the beast-taming collars. Then he rode on a flying crane and led the crowd to the northwest of the cold abyss. He moved extremely fast and did not delay on the way. After more than 20 days, he arrived at the Moon Cauldron Lake where he had agreed to meet Han Zwicheng. But when he arrived here, he found out that Han Zwicheng had received an important message a few days ago, so he left with his people. Only a few elders of Bu Pavilion were responsible for all the matters here. The arrival of more than 100 people was not a small matter, and they were the long-awaited reinforcements. The elder of Bu Pavilion, Yan Xiaoyang, personally came out to welcome them. But when he saw Fang Xinan, the smile on his face suddenly disappeared and turned cold. He frowned and said, "It's you." In the past, the spiritual bird that he raised was forcibly taken away by Fang Xinan. He had always remembered such a shame. Later, he heard that Fang Xinan was expelled from the sect and there was no news of him. He thought that Fang Xinan was dead, but he did not expect that he would appear in front of him again. Looking at his appearance, he seemed to be quite important, so he was extremely unhappy. Although Fang Xinan also knew that he would have to deal with the people of Bu Pavilion on this trip, he did not expect to meet this person as soon as he arrived. It could be said that there was a grudge between them in the past. But he was no longer the frivolous young man of that day. His face did not change. He cupped his hands and said, "Greetings, Zhenren Yan." Yan Xiaoyang looked at him a few times but did not speak. The cultivators at the side noticed that there seemed to be something wrong between the two of them, and they all showed surprised expressions. For a moment, no one spoke casually, and the atmosphere suddenly became cold. Yan Xiaoyang stared at Fang Xinan, but the latter seemed to be unaware of it, and his expression remained the same as just now. After a dozen breaths, Yan Xiaoyang slowly opened his mouth and said, "Fellow Fang, I heard that you were originally an outstanding disciple of the South Flower sect. I think you must have learned a lot of skills. Do you have any clue about finding the cloud whale?" Fang Xinan said, "The cloud whale likes to stop at the mountains and lakes. Although the northern cold abyss is vast, there are also a few large lakes and high mountains. As long as we wait in those areas, we won't be able to find anything." Yan Xiaoyang sneered and said, "That's it." He snorted and said, "Do you think the Heavenly Ghost Tribe doesn't know about this? And if we continue to wait like this, who knows how long it will take? Who knows if the Heavenly Ghost Tribe will have already attacked by then?" Fang Xinan said, "Then what does Zhenren think we should do?" Yan Xiaoyang looked at everyone and said, "After I caught the cloud whale, I carefully examined it for dozens of days. I found that there was a small insect attached to it, but it can't be found anywhere else. Once it leaves the body of the whale, it loses water and dies." At this point, he puffed out his chest and raised his voice. "That's why I used a month to raise a bird that specializes in eating this insect. As long as I'm given a few more months, I'll be able to raise tens of thousands of them. Then I'll go to those mountains and lakes you mentioned. It won't be difficult to find the hiding place of these whales in a few years." Hearing him say so, the cultivators of Bu Pavilion all expressed their admiration. Fang Xinan nodded inwardly and said, "Temperament aside, this Yan Xiaoyang's ability is not bad. He can actually raise such a spirit bird in 2 to 3 months. Although it's a little rough, it's also because he hasn't been promoted. If he didn't come from Bu Pavilion, he would be someone in the Southern Flower sect. After all, he was here under orders, so Yan Xiaoyang couldn't do anything to him." After a few derogatory words, Yan Xiaoyang left with his people. Even the banquet that was prepared was cancelled. At this time, a steady cultivator behind Fang Xinan walked up and asked, "Zhenren Fang, what should I do later?" Fang Xinan thought for a while and said, "It's good that we don't have these people holding us back. We can act on our own. Let's see who's more skillful. Let's find the cloud whale first." The cultivator said in a low voice that Yan Xiaoyang seems to have killing intent in his eyes when he looks at Zhenren just now. Zhenren Fang must be careful. Fang Xinan sneered in his heart and said, "Don't worry. It won't be that easy to scheme against me." To be continued. Chapter 13:10. Zhang Yan left the earth abyss and headed straight for the void sky. He was going there to continue harvesting the spiritual vigor of clear purple, and at the same time, he could hand over the refinement stone to the 2 sect masters so that he could attach the profound technique to it. After the pure spiritual chi and cloud light left the chi barrier and flew for about 3 minutes, he suddenly felt 2 strands of God's will. His heart skipped a beat. These 2 actually took the initiative to look for him. Something must have happened. Hence, he released his spirit and came to an indescribable space. Seeing that the two sect leaders were already there, he cupped his fists and said, "Sect leader Jinren greets you, sect leader Yu greets you." Sect Master Qin said in a low voice, "Just now, when Sect Master Yu and I were harvesting the pure spiritual qi, we sensed something strange coming from beyond the heavens. When we followed the qi, we found out that it was a white monster. Sect Master Yu and I smashed it from afar, and its remains were scattered everywhere. Sect Master Yu and I will take care of it in the void sky, but there are many that are falling towards the mountain and sea realm." Zhang Yan was slightly surprised. It was actually a white monster. According to the legends, it was a vicious creature that was born from the essence qi of demons and other creatures that were trapped in the void sky. Usually, it would wander in the void sky essence sea, looking for a suitable void sky to break into. As long as a bit of its body fell into the mountains, and earth, it would constantly kill living creatures to absorb the spiritual qi, which was very troublesome to deal with. He understood that if it was just a vicious thing like this, the two sect masters would not pay so much attention to it. This time, they were probably investigating whether it was related to the cultivator from beyond the heavens. So he cupped his hands and said, "Disciple will stop it." After a pause, he said, "Disciple found a devouring stone and a refined jade in the earth abyss. Perhaps they can be used as a support for the mysterious technique." He explained the origins of the two objects in 2 or 3 sentences. After Sect Master Qin heard it, he said, "Thank you, Sect Master Duzhen. The refined jade is very useful. As for the devouring stone, there are many impurities. Leave it in the sect for now, and we will make arrangements in the future." Zhang Yan said, "Disciple will order that demon to send the refined jade over." The matter was settled. He withdrew his divine will and flicked his finger. Thousands of sword lights suddenly flashed and flew into the depths of the void. Then he cast a Dharma seal and summoned the demon. He handed the refined jade to the demon and ordered him to leave. He landed in the azure sky hall. He closed his eyes and adjusted his breathing. Bai Kengguai's broken body was quite far away, and it would take some time before he could arrive. He still had to wait. WW1 Ka book. About 2 months later, he suddenly felt a sense of foreboding, so he stepped on the light and looked into the void. Among the countless stars, there was a vast expanse of silver-glowing snow falling toward him. Bai Kengguai's body was comparable to the heavenly star. What he saw was still a small number. Most of his body should have been destroyed. He sensed that the qi dynamic of this ferocious monster was not strong. At most, it was similar to that of a heavenly abode who had cultivated the nascent embryo. Therefore, it was not difficult to intercept it. With a lift of his hand, boundless profound qi of the chaotic netherworld surged forth and engulfed all of it. When the silver light sensed an external force on it, it began to swell and struggle. Zhang Yan smiled faintly. With just a little bit of mana, he was able to subdue it. He investigated for a while. This ferocious monster was weaker than he had imagined. Its body was injured, and even its spirit had been severely damaged. It could dissipate at any time. However, its body was formed from essence qi, so it was not really dead. If it fell into the mountain and sea realm, it would only act according to its instincts. A ferocious monster that did not know how to hide was actually very easy prey for the native demons. Of course, if it was given enough essence qi and spiritual energy, then it could give birth to a brand new will, which would lead to endless disasters. Furthermore, he could sense that the White Inquisitor hadn't been born very long ago. Based on the years of the mountain and sea realm, it had only been around 100 years. Furthermore, there was some quintessence energy within the corpse that didn't belong to the White Inquisitor itself. Based on those two factors, it was clear that the White Inquisitor's current power wasn't something it had originally possessed, but rather something else. Either it had been lucky enough to run into some demonic devil cultivator who had been lost in the void and had devoured all of its quintessence energy, or it had run into another White Inquisitor who had fused the two together. However, both of those possibilities were extremely unlikely. The only other explanation was that some almighty divine being had forced quintessence energy into the White Inquisitor's body and then sent it to this place. Zhang Yan's mind raced. Considering that the power from beyond the heavens had already mobilized these ferocious monsters, it was clear that the mountain and sea realm had used up all of its resources. However, it also showed that they viewed the mountain and sea realm with much more importance than he had previously estimated. He needed to read some books. After a moment of thought, he returned to the Blue Sky Temple. However, he did not withdraw his sword light, in case there were any remnants of the Bai Qingguai's corpse outside. At the same time, he used his divine will to inform the two sect leaders of his just now situation. Yu Xianxiao said, "The power from beyond the heavens is constantly making moves. They've even resorted to Bai Qingguai. The longer we delay, the more variables there will be. Sect leader Qin, it seems that we need to bring forward the expedition against the heavenly ghost." Sect leader Qin nodded. Zhang Yan asked, "Sect leader, when do you think is the best time to act?" Sect leader Qin said, "The refined jade that Temple Lord Duzhen mentioned is a spirit stone that was born at the beginning of the heavens and earth. It is used to carry profound techniques, and should take about 10 years to complete. In that case, let's set the time limit at 20 years. However, if there are any changes before then, we should act a bit earlier." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Disciple will make the necessary arrangements in the mountain and sea realm." In the western region of the northern heaven frigid abyss, above a certain lake, there was black light and smoke. Magical treasures flickered incessantly. More than 100 cultivators and hundreds of demonic dragons were fighting against more than 1,000 heavenly ghosts. Every few breaths, a heavenly ghost clansman would scream and fall from the sky. In less than 2 hours, the lake was filled with their corpses. Fang Shun and stood in the sky. Ever since he parted with Yen Xiaoyang on bad terms, he had led his subordinates and many demonic dragons to sweep through the northern heaven frigid abyss. Because his master was Sima Quan, he could easily find out the movements of many heavenly ghost clansmen. Therefore, within half a year, he had broken through more than 10 clansmen. He had indeed made a lot of contributions. However, there were also some setbacks. Until now, he had not found a single cloud whale, let alone the Whale King. This matter involving the cloud whale was arranged by the heavenly ghost clan leader and a few people. Even Sima Quan had no way of knowing. Another hour passed, and the heavenly ghost clansmen were slaughtered. Fang Shun and waved his hand, and the cultivators extracted a drop of blood essence from the corpses of the dead heavenly ghosts and placed it in a porcelain bottle. This was proof that he had led his people to kill the heavenly ghosts. In the future, he would have to rely on this item to discuss his contributions. He could have used the precious jade to illuminate the scene, but according to the rules, he had to first show it to Han Zhuqing. Han Zhuqing was Yen Xiaoyang's brother-in-law, and also Zhang Yan's disciple. He was afraid that Han Zhuqing would be dissatisfied with him and cause trouble. If that happened, he would have no one to reason with. Therefore, he preferred to be careful. After the cultivators extracted the blood essence, hundreds of demonic dragons rushed forward and began to devour the corpses of the heavenly ghosts. A cultivator wearing an ink-colored cloak flew over and cupped his fists, saying, "Master, those heavenly ghosts are really difficult to kill. They can actually shapeshift. If it wasn't for Senior Brother's warning, they might have escaped." Fang Shun said, "These tribes are only the lower branches of the heavenly ghost clan, so the divine abilities they can cultivate are mostly weak. Like the original Shanyang clan, as long as they grow to the age of 10, almost everyone can cultivate such a divine ability. It's even more troublesome to deal with them." The cultivator revealed a shocked expression. He licked his lips and said, "Everyone can have such a divine ability? The Qi and blood path really doesn't make sense." Fang Shun shook his head and said, "The Qi and blood path has too many limitations and is too crude. It can't be considered a superior technique, so it can only be used for a while in this world." The cultivator looked at him in surprise and said, "That's not bad. Do you still want to break through the outer space, Master?" Fang Shun didn't answer. He did have such thoughts, but just now he had cultivated to Yuanying, and it was still unknown if he could cultivate a grotto heaven, so he didn't want to talk about it. At this time, a letter suddenly flew over from the sky. As it neared, it hovered above his head. Fang Shunan reached out and took it. After reading it, he frowned and said, "Order everyone to summon the demonic dragons back. Follow me back to Moon Cauldron Lake." The cultivator was stunned and said, "Master, why are you in such a hurry? What's the matter?" Fang Shunan said, "The cultivators of Blue Feather Pavilion have accidentally discovered a heavenly ghost settlement of nearly 60,000 people. Although there are no demon saints among them, they can't attack them with their strength alone, so they need us to go and meet them." The cultivator sneered and said, "You didn't pay attention to us before, but you only remembered when you needed us." Fang Shunan flicked his sleeve, and the letter turned into spiritual light and dissipated. He said, "If we can destroy this heavenly ghost settlement, it will be a great contribution, so there's no need to care so much about it." The cultivator thought about it and found it reasonable, so he immediately went to pass on the order. Soon, the cultivators gathered together again. They all mounted their spirit birds and flew west. More than 60 days later, they returned to Moon Cauldron Lake. After Fang Shunan came down and reported his identity, no one came to make things difficult for him this time, and he was led to the main hall. Yan Xiaoyang was standing on the main seat. He glanced at Fang Shunan with a cold gaze, then turned around and asked, "Elder Chow, Master Fang is here. What is Master Han doing? Why isn't he here to take charge of the situation?" The person called Elder Chow hesitated and said, "Master Han is trying to persuade the newly captured cloud whale." Yan Xiaoyang snorted and said, "It's just a waste of time. Those cloud whales won't betray the Whale King at all." Elder Chow said in a low voice, "Perhaps Master Han has a way to tame it and escape to the Whale King?" Yan Xiaoyang laughed coldly. "If it were that easy, the cloud whale race would have been exterminated a long time ago. The Whale King knows what every single one of his clansmen is thinking. Even if he could really escape, it can only be a trap." He waved his hand. "Forget it. Since he wants to wash his hands of this matter, I'll take care of it." Elder Chow seemed to disagree, but he looked around and saw that no one was willing to step forward, so he could only keep quiet. When Fang Shunan heard this, a strange light appeared in his eyes, and he thought to himself, although Yan Xiaoyang and Han Zwicheng are uncle to each other, their relationship might not be as close as I thought. Otherwise, Yan Xiaoyang wouldn't have said such derogatory words in public. This is interesting. Perhaps I can get to know this Master Fang Shunan more. Chapter 1311. Fang Shunan came out of the meeting hall and ordered the cultivator beside him, "Go and find out how the heavenly ghost tribe discovered it. Then, try to find out why Immortal Han didn't come to take charge of the situation. Is it really as Yan Xiaoyang said?" The cultivator accepted the order and left. After a long time, he turned back and said, "I've found out that it was discovered by a disciple by accident. There were no twists and turns. As for Immortal Han, just as Yan Xiaoyang said, he tried to communicate with the cloud whale a few days ago. He has been away from Moon Cauldron Lake for a long time. He seems to be trying to find a way to get to the Whale King's side. Does Immortal Han think this method will work?" Fang Shunan thought about it seriously and said, "If it was the previous Bu Pavilion, it would definitely be impossible. But if it's this Immortal Han, it might be possible." The cultivator was puzzled. "Why is that?" Fang Shunan said, "After the Southern Flower sect was destroyed, the Clear Feather sect inherited most of its legacy. However, Sect Master Tao gave many treasures and techniques to this Immortal Han. Maybe there's a way to find the cloud whale among them." The cultivator couldn't help but come to a realization. Fang Shunan said, "You may leave." Watching the cultivator leave, he went to the lodging. As soon as he entered the door, he saw a Taoist with a cold expression sitting cross-legged inside. He hurriedly took a few steps forward and bowed. "Disciple greets Master." Sima Quan grunted and said coldly, "You have to be careful. The settlement you discovered might very well be a trap set by the heavenly ghost." Fang Shunan was surprised. "Trap?" Sima Quan said, "The heavenly ghosts also communicate with each other through the birds' beaks. They know that you're hunting them. If it were you, would you just sit and wait for death?" Fang Shunan said, "Disciple definitely wouldn't do that. Sima Quan said, "That's right. I've stayed in the Heavenly Ghost tribe for a long time and know their temperament well. Not only will they not be able to control themselves, but they will also try to fight back. Otherwise, don't expect these scattered tribes to help." Fong Sinan thought for a moment, and his heart trembled. He asked, "Will there be a demon saint?" Sima Quan shook his head and said, "Absolutely not. If the demonic sage were to make a move, he would expose himself. It wasn't worth their effort." Fong Xin and relaxed a little. As long as it wasn't a great monster, he should be able to deal with it. He said, "Thank you for your advice, master. I will be careful." Sima Quan did not speak further. He stood up and walked out, but his figure grew fainter and fainter. After he walked out, he disappeared without a trace. In the center of the Moon Cauldron Lake, there was a 300-meter-tall ship moored. In the cabin of the ship, Yen Xiaoyang sat on the seat of honor while a handsome young cultivator stood below him. This was the most outstanding disciple of the Yen clan, Yen Zixin. He had cultivated for more than 500 years, and with Yen Xiaoyang's support at all costs. He had already entered the Yuanying realm. Yen Xiaoyang said in a low voice, "Zixian, as long as you make a great contribution in this battle, after my sister abdicates, with my support, you can fight for the position of sect leader. You must remember, the Blue Feather Pavilion belongs to the Yen clan. It must not fall into the hands of someone with a different surname." Yen Zixin said seriously, "Reverend is right. The sect leader of the Blue Feather Pavilion can only be a member of the Yen clan." Yen Xiaoyang nodded slowly, "We will make our move in 2 days. Bring all the magic treasures I found for you. That will increase your chances of success." Yen Zixin said, "Disciple will remember." Yen Xiaoyang waved his hand and said, "Go." After Yen Zixin retreated, Yen Xiaoyang looked out at the lake with a complicated expression. His sister, Yen Xie, had cultivated for nearly 1,000 years. Perhaps because she felt that her lifespan was coming to an end, she lacked a successor. After coming to the mountain and sea realm, she had a son with Han Zwicheng. His name was Han Xiaoda, and he had been sent to the Clear Feather sect to cultivate. With the Clear Feather sect to rely on, coupled with Han Zwicheng's support, he could already see that the position of sect leader would fall into Han Xiaoda's hands in the future. As a disciple of the Yen clan, he absolutely did not want to see such a scene. However, the Yen clan had outstanding juniors, and had enough prestige, so they could still hold their own. They would not leave the sect established by their ancestors to an outsider, and this expedition against the Heavenly Ghost tribe was an opportunity. More than 50,000 kilometers away, on a strangely high cliff, Han Zwicheng was instructing dozens of disciples to plant a kind of flower with golden petals and jade-like stems. After planting the last flower, he breathed a sigh of relief and went outside. He cupped his hands to a rather dignified, beautiful, bearded cultivator and said apologetically, "Junior apprentice Brother Shen, sorry to have kept you waiting." Shen Dong smiled and said, "Senior apprentice Brother Han, given our friendship, there's no need to be so polite." Han Zwicheng smiled as well. Shen Dong looked at the spirit flowers and asked, "I remember that senior apprentice brother doesn't like flowers and plants. There must be a reason why you're fiddling with these things, right?" "That's right." Han Zwicheng treated people sincerely and did not hide anything from this good friend of his. He directly told the truth. "Junior apprentice brother knows that everything I did before was to find that whale king, and this matter will probably fall on these 100 or so flowers." Shen Dong looked at them again and said, "These flowers don't seem to have anything special about them." Han Zwicheng smiled and said, "These are the West Brightness flowers that I got from my grandmaster. The cloud whale loves to eat these things, and even if it's thousands of kilometers away, it will still rush over. If that whale king knows that there are many of them here, although it won't personally come here to take the risk, it will most likely send its descendants to look for them. Little does it know that the disciples who planted these flowers cultivate the cultivation technique of Taihao school. Although their cultivation is still shallow, as long as they personally plant the flowers, no matter where they go, they will be able to sense the general direction. As long as these flowers are brought to the whale king's side, they will be able to find its hiding place." Shen Dong nodded and said, "This is really a good idea. I originally thought that fellow Taoist would be like that spiritual master Yen and use spirit birds and beasts to find the cloud whale." Hans Wiching smiled and said, "Although I'm good at beast taming, sometimes I don't have to use such a method. Doing that will instead trap myself." At this moment, he suddenly thought of something and said, "Junior brother Shen has come at this time. Is there any change in the Moon Cauldron Lake?" Shen Tong said, "Reverend Yen discovered a heavenly ghost settlement with tens of thousands of people. He proposed to gather them and asked me to find you. I know he wants to send me away so that it'll be easier for him to act. I'm afraid we won't be able to make it in time even if we go there now." Hans Wiching was startled. He sighed and said, "Forget it. If he wants to fight for merit, then let him go." Shen Tong smiled and said, "That's true. Senior Martial Brother Han is Taoist Zhang's disciple. There's no need to fight over these things." Hans Wiching smiled bitterly and said, "Under Master, I am the most useless disciple." Shen Dong shook his head and said, "Senior Martial Brother Han, you're wrong. If we cultivators only do what our masters expect of us, we won't be able to do anything. Going against one's conscience and doing something one didn't want to do, wouldn't that make one even more uncomfortable than a mortal? Then what was the point of cultivating? What was the point of seeking immortality? Moreover, I think that Taoist Zhang would not care about these things." Hans Wiching thought for a while and nodded. He sighed and said, "Junior brother Shin, you've always been focused on cultivation and have never enjoyed anything. Perhaps in the eyes of outsiders, you've been living a life of poverty, but I know that you've enjoyed it. Perhaps this is precisely because you've followed your heart." Shen Dong laughed and said, "Senior brother Han is indeed my best friend. I cultivate all day and don't ask about anything else. That's because I don't think about anything other than the great Tao. How can an outsider understand the joy in this?" Hans Wiching sighed and said, "Junior brother Shen, you're so focused on improving. No wonder you can achieve the Yuanying Dharmakaya." Shen Dong only smiled. In his eyes, the Yuanying Dharmakaya was just a peak on the path of cultivation. The Grotto Heaven realm was even more dangerous. If he couldn't make it, there was nothing to brag about. Hans Wiching said, "I've hidden a few jars of good wine on the flying ship. They were given to me by a tribe of the foreign species. Since Junior brother Shin is here, why don't you share the same grade as me?" Shen Dong smiled and said, "I couldn't ask for more." The two of them exchanged pleasantries, then he followed Hans Wiching to the flying ship in the sky. But at this moment his gaze became deep. He was deep in thought. He could also see that the heavenly demons were likely to be a trap. Yen Xiaoyang had ordered him to inform Hans Wiching. He could have rushed over quickly, but he purposely delayed for a few days. When Hans Wiching heard the news, it would be too late even if he wanted to rush back. He thought to himself, "Senior brother Han, I hope you won't blame me in the future. I hope you won't blame me in the future." Yen Xiaoyang offended his superiors. "If I don't punish him, who else will serve you? Since you are soft-hearted and unwilling to punish him, then let him be." After this battle, even if this person doesn't die, his trusted subordinates will definitely suffer heavy casualties. Then, when you are in charge of the overall situation, no one will be able to criticize you. 2 days later, Yen Xiaoyang brought all the men he could mobilize and summoned Fang Sinan as well. The two parties combined had nearly 1,000 cultivators and 2,000 demonic dragons, and they bolted toward the Heavenly Ghosts settlement in a formidable array. After traveling for more than 20 months, they gradually approached the settlement. A Geo dragon flew over and landed on Fang Xin and shoulder, calling out to him. He thought to himself, "We've come with such a great momentum, but this heavenly demon settlement doesn't seem to have any abnormalities. It seems that Master was right. This is indeed a trap." At this time, Yen Xiaoyang also felt a little strange, but the arrow was already knocked on the bowstring. It was already impossible for him to stop. He turned around and said, "Zhenren Fang, later you attack from the east, and I will attack from the west. When the smoke rises, we will attack together. What do you think?" Fang Xin was very happy and said, "All right, it's settled then." Yen Xiaoyang waved his hand and led his subordinates to the west. After Fong Sinan parted ways with him, he soon arrived at the top of a mountain. Not long after, he saw a wisp of spirit smoke rushing into the sky, and it didn't dissipate for a long time. He looked at it, smiled, and actually ignored it. The cultivator standing behind him said, "Master, if I don't move, we'll lose this opportunity. Yan Xiaoyang will push the blame on us. What should we do?" Fang Xin sneered and said, "I'm here on Master Zhang's order. If Master Han personally gave the order, it would be my fault if I don't obey. But Yan Xiaoyang isn't Master Han, so why should I listen to him? Even if I attack later, no one can say anything about it." Yan Xiaoyang's face grew cold when he saw that there was no movement from the other side. He had originally planned to use Fang Xin as the vanguard, while he watched from the back. The best outcome would be for both sides to be injured, but now it seemed that wouldn't work. However, in the past half year, in addition to the disciples and demonic dragons he had met, he also had nearly 10,000 demons he had subdued in the mountain and sea realm. Even without Fang Xin and the others, he had more than enough to fight the heavenly demon tribe head-on. Therefore, he pulled out his magic sword, pointed it down, and shouted, "Everyone, follow me. Let's slaughter these demons and devils." Chapter 13:12. In the abode, Yang Yanjun released the mana and spiritual vigor from his body, lighting up the place. With a respectful look on his face, he bowed to Chen Yitsong and said, "Master, please give me some pointers." Chen Yitsong identified it and looked pleased. He stroked his beard and said, "Not bad, just one more step and you will be able to condense the elixir." Yang Yanjun heaved a sigh of relief, and his face showed a happy expression. He had the body of a sky ghost. Every time he refined his qi, he would instinctively move his qi and blood. In the beginning, he could not move his spiritual vigor smoothly. He might be lacking in other things, but he did not lack perseverance. It took him many years to gradually correct this habit. Even though he had been progressing slowly for a long time, his foundation was still solid. He had stumbled all the way until now, but he was finally about to take this crucial step. Chen Yitsong said, "It's really not easy for you to restrain the boiling of your qi and blood. However, the path of cultivation is slow and steady. Even though you have passed the hurdle, your state of mind is still not stable enough. You barely broke through the realm, and you still need to practice more. You can go out and relax for a period of time. You don't have to think about anything, do whatever you want to do. If you have any ideas, you can tell me again." Yang Yanjun cherished the opportunity to cultivate, and he always believed in Chen Yitsong's words. He remembered these words in his heart, bowed, and left the abode. When he came outside, he saw that it was a sunny day, and there were white birds flying between the blue sky and the blue sea, singing in the sky. He unconsciously felt relaxed, and had the thought of soaring into the sky and roaming the firmament. At this moment, a white bird suddenly flew from the sky and landed in front of him. A lady came down from the back of the bird, and it was his senior apprentice sister, Ding Xian. He hurriedly bowed and said, "Senior apprentice sister." Ding Xian originally wanted to come up and talk to him, but when she saw him bowing in a serious manner, she sighed and bowed as well. After she straightened up, she stared at him, as if blaming him for being too polite. But she quickly put this small matter behind her and said, "Junior apprentice brother, do you know that something big happened recently?" Yang Yanjun coughed. Every once in a while, this senior apprentice sister would tell him about some big events, but it was nothing more than how many demons they had killed today, or how they had wiped out a different tribe the next day. At first, he found it novel, but after a while, he became bored. But he couldn't stop her from speaking either. After all, there were only the two of them from the same sect. He could only helplessly ask, "What is it?" Seeing his listless expression, Ding Xian said, "Hey," and patted his shoulder again, saying with dissatisfaction, "It's really a big matter this time. Didn't senior sister tell me a few days ago that Master Han was ordered to wipe out the heavenly ghost tribe that had infiltrated the cold abyss?" Han Zwicheng had come to visit Chen Yitsong on the first day Yang Yanjun came to the island. After that, he often came to see Chen Yitsong, so Yang Yanjun was very familiar with him. She subconsciously nodded and said, "Senior Marshal Sister, something big happened. Was it this spiritual Master Han? What are you thinking?" Ding Xian glared at him angrily. Jinren Han is Zhang Shangjin's disciple. Who in this world can touch him? Yang Yanjun also came to a realization. Among the few almighty experts in the 9 continents, one of them was Jinren Han's master. Presumably, he had some life-saving treasures on him. He was thinking too much, so he hurriedly said, "What could it be?" Ding Xian said, "I heard that one of Jinren Han's disciples discovered a heavenly ghost tribe with tens of thousands of people. At that time, Jinren Han was outside and didn't know about it. However, one of his disciples, Elder Yen, was eager to gain merit. Without waiting for Jinren Han's orders, he took the initiative and led his subordinates to encircle and annihilate the tribe. Who knew that it was actually a trap set up by the heavenly ghost tribe? I don't know what treasure they used, but more than 300 cultivators were killed on the spot. More than half of the spirit birds, beasts, and demonic dragons they brought with them were also lost. I heard that Elder Yen only managed to escape with his life. It was a very tragic battle." At this point, she sighed. In the end, Jinren Fang brought reinforcements and wiped out the entire heavenly ghost tribe. I'm afraid that this battle was a great defeat for the cultivators of the 9 continents in the mountain and sea realm. Yang Yanjun had been in the sect for many years, and had already integrated into the Clear Feather sect. When he heard this, he couldn't help but ask anxiously, "Then how many disciples did our Clear Feather sect lose?" Ding Xian said, "With Jinren Fang leading the way, our losses weren't great. I heard that only 2 of our fellow disciples suffered some light injuries." Yang Yanjun breathed a sigh of relief and said, "That's good. Does that mean that we won the battle?" Ding Xian sighed and said, "We won, but we also lost. Not a single one of the tens of thousands of heavenly ghost tribes survived. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell that these heavenly ghosts were bait to slaughter our fellow Taoists of the 9 continents." At this point, she said angrily, "For such a goal, they didn't hesitate to sacrifice the lives of so many of their own. The mastermind behind this scheme must be cruel and indifferent." Yang Yanjun shook his head and said in a slightly cold voice, "The heavenly ghost tribe has a clear hierarchy. If I'm not mistaken, the people sacrificed this time were probably just the lowly commoners in the eyes of the higher-ups. But in the eyes of the higher-ups, they are things that can be casually thrown away, not even worth mentioning. To be able to exchange them for the lives of cultivators of our generation, perhaps in their eyes, it was a good deal." Ding Xian was startled and said, "Is that so?" Seeing that Yang Yanjun seemed to be in low spirits, she recalled that this little junior brother of hers had once had such a status. She comforted him and said, "Junior brother, once you enter the Taoist gate, you are a cultivator. Just let go of the past. If you keep worrying about it, it will become a mental barrier and be detrimental to your cultivation." Yang Yanjun took a breath and clasped his hands, saying, "Thank you for your guidance, senior sister." He thought, "It seems that Master was right. My mind is not yet stable, so I need to go out and train for a while." In the Frost Jade Ocean province, there was an enormous mountain that reached into the sky. The shape of the mountain was somewhat similar to the clear nether heavenly lake of the 9 continents. If someone with profound cultivation looked over, they would see that the peak of this mountain was precisely where the Blue Sky Hall was located outside the air barrier. This place was another clear nether mountain after Lu Yenyi and Tian Kuan had created it by moving the mountains, rivers, earth, and soil together. Now, most of the disciples of the clear nether lineage had moved here. At the peak of the mountain, there was also a heavenly lake. At this time, in the pavilion at the center of the lake, Lu Yenyi and Tian Kuan were sitting on cushions and discussing the matters of the sect. Because the battle with Sky Demon had been brought forward, Zhang Yan was seizing the opportunity to refine rare treasures and absorb violet qi, so he handed some of the mundane matters of the sect to his 2 disciples. Lu Yenyi held a letter in her hand and said, "The demons of the 100 continents of the south are constantly heading north. Although the countries of the eastern wasteland have stopped them, they have suffered great losses. Many restrictive formations and flying ships have been damaged, and they need my help. Previously, Master has already ordered people to gather a group of disciples who are skilled in refining artifacts from various sects, but there are no cloud whales in the eastern wasteland. To ensure the safety of the journey, I can only trouble Junior Brother to personally escort them. Tian Kun cupped his hands and said, "This matter is urgent, I will leave tomorrow." After discussing a few more matters, a disciple came to the foot of the pavilion and bowed to Lu Yeni, saying, "Reporting to Grandmaster, Senior Brother D has come." Because there were many casualties in the battle a few days ago, Lu Yeni sent the eldest disciple of the fourth generation, Di Hui, to investigate in detail. Hearing that he had returned, she said, "Call him up." When Di Hui arrived at the pavilion, he first came up to greet Lu Yeni and Tian Kun, then said, "Disciple has investigated clearly. This heavenly ghost tribe can kill hundreds of our cultivators by relying on a treasure that I don't know where it came from. It is said that more than half of the troops led by spiritual master Yen were killed on the spot." Di Hui took out a jade box from his sleeve and placed it on the table. He said, "The fragments of this item have been stored in the box. Grandmaster and spiritual master Tian, please take a look." Lu Yeni flicked her sleeve and opened the jade box. Suddenly, a beam of light was emitted from inside, shooting straight into the sky, but after a flash, it disappeared. When they looked again, they saw that there were layers of fine, crystalline objects at the bottom of the box. Tian Kun looked at it and said, "This item is only damaged, but it can still accumulate qi and release light. If it is complete, its power can be imagined." Di Hui said, "I heard from spiritual master Fong that more than 2,000 dragon demons and nearly 10,000 demons were killed by this magnificent and fierce qi as soon as they appeared, including the tens of thousands of heavenly ghosts. Almost 30% of them were killed by this item." Tian Kun said in a deep voice, "This attack is already the power of a Yuanying Dharmakaya cultivator." Not to mention the cultivators, there were more than 300 dragon demons among the 2,000 or so dragon demons that were equivalent to spiritual body realm mystic cultivators. More than half of them were killed in an instant, so one could imagine how powerful it was. Lu Yeni reached out and grabbed the crystalline fragments into her jade palm. After carefully examining them for a moment, she said, "There are dazzling golden gang, jade sun qi, 9 refining grass, and dozens of unknown miscellaneous items here. This method is definitely not done by the heavenly ghost. It may be a treasure that it obtained after defeating the extraterrestrial cultivators." Tian Kun nodded and said, "This makes sense." Di Hui bowed again and reported, "The person who activated this artifact is an elder of the Heaven Ghoul race. He wanted to escape, but fortunately, spiritual master Fong and his subordinates intercepted him. However, this person has 10 world viewing towers to protect him. When this disciple arrived, he was still resisting stubbornly. I don't know if he was captured or not." Speaking of this, he took out a letter from his sleeve and handed it over. "This is the letter that spiritual master Han asked me to give to you before we left." Lu Yeni took the letter and read it. She sighed slightly and said, "In the letter, Junior Brother Han said that this time, he did not handle things well and used the wrong people, causing the casualties of many cultivators. He asked the sect to punish him. It seems that he wants to take the blame to reduce Yen Xiaoyang's punishment." Tian Kun said in a deep voice, "Although Junior Martial Brother Han cares about your brother-in-law's friendship, Yen Xiaoyang lied to his superiors and deceived his subordinates. He was eager for quick success and instant benefits. Not only did he exhaust hundreds of cultivators to death, he even lost thousands of demonic dragons. He cannot escape the blame for this matter. I think that he should be punished severely." Speaking of which, although many cultivators had perished this time, most of them were disciples of the Blue Feather Pavilion, and the others were not implicated. In fact, tens of thousands of heavenly ghosts had been wiped out. If Yen Xiaoyang was really one of them, they could not pursue the matter further, and could even comfort him in private. However, he had heard from Wang Kading that Han Zwicheng's brother-in-law did not have a harmonious relationship with Yen Xiaoyang, and Yen Xiaoyang even targeted him at every turn. If he were to let this go, it would be equivalent to encouraging this person's arrogance. Therefore, he was determined to play the role of the villain and seize the opportunity to take him down to prevent future disasters. Lu Yinyi also nodded and said, "This Yan Xiaoyang's intentions are not pure. Pass on my order. Send Zhuangzhang to the Moon Cauldron Lake and bring this man here. After the Sky Demon's expedition, he will be punished along with all those who have done wrong." Chapter 13:13. In the lake of the Azure Heaven Hall, there was an island about 100 acres in size. The swallowing stone that was found in the abyss was placed there. Zhang Yan sat cross-legged in front of the stone, as if he was sensing something. After a few days, he stood up and walked to the front of the stone. With a flick of his sleeve, the remains of the white catcher were all thrown under the large stone. The swallowing stone shook and immediately released a suction force. The remains of the white catcher floated up and slowly approached the stone before being sucked into it. Zhang Yan looked at it without blinking. A faint light flashed in his eyes. Perhaps it was because it had swallowed too many things, but the swallow stone had also expanded a little. But at this moment, several needle-sized holes suddenly appeared on the stone body, and black gas came out. After 100 breaths, the stone body returned to its original appearance. Although this stone was called the swallowing stone, it was not that it could only be entered and not exited. It could also refine and expel the impurities in the body. If it did not do so, after so many years, its body could only maintain the size of a mountain, unable to change at all. If this continued, sooner or later, it would reach its limit. In the end, it would either be trapped to death or be sealed by a powerful being. After the stone developed a spirit, in order to avoid such a crisis, it consciously did so. In fact, before this, its body was almost 10,000 feet, and it could not even fly. Zhang Yan sensed with all his might and saw all of these changes. In fact, he did not even let go of the minute changes within the swallowing stone. He thought to himself, "Looks like my previous idea was not wrong. If I make good use of it, it can be considered useful. In that case, I'll give it a try." He used his mana and swept the stone into his sleeve. A clear light flashed and it flew into the void. After traveling for about 30 days, he looked around and saw a ball of starlight gathering in the distance. He slowly rolled over and got close to it. That object was the unborn essence of the demonic ancestor on the ground. He gave it a name, Yuan Hun. Its intelligence was not developed, and its nature was to pursue vitality. Once a living thing passed by, it would not let go and would not let go. It would be hard to shake him off. Previously, in order to harvest clear purple spiritual vigor, he did not want to waste his mana and avoided this thing as much as he could. But now that he had the swallowing stone in his hand, there was no need to do so. The vitality and spirit energy on his body were extremely vast. As soon as he got close, Yuan Hun immediately sensed him and charged over aggressively. Zhang Yan did not make any unnecessary movements, only throwing the swallowing stone forward. The creature seemed to be unable to adapt to the changes in the void, and it only managed to stabilize itself after tumbling dozens of times. Yuan Hun had already approached at this moment and instinctively rushed towards Zhang Yan's location. However, he did not pay any attention to swallowing stone and immediately swept it in. The swallowing stone would naturally not miss out on such a delicacy that was delivered to its doorstep. It immediately released a suction force and swallowed it without any hesitation. Yuan Hun immediately shook and a ball of light suddenly burst out of his body, then dimmed, then brightened again. It was even more dazzling than before, but in the blink of an eye, it would darken again. This happened repeatedly, each time more intense than the last. Zhang Yan calmly watched from the side. This was Yuan Hun unleashing his essence energy in an attempt to shatter the swallowing stone in one fell swoop. However, this action was clearly futile, because the more he did this, the more it encouraged the swallowing stone's arrogance. Furthermore, the stone's body was refined jade, and it had existed since the mountain and sea realm was created. How could it be so easily destroyed? The correct thing to do was to throw it out, but Yuan Hun instinctively did not think of such a thing. Anything that was entangled by it would not be spared. After waiting here for more than half a month, Yuan Hun finally used up all of his essence energy. The strands of starlight essence energy were all absorbed by the swallowing stone. With this nourishment, the inside of the stone flickered with light, and after a few more days, it slowly dimmed and returned to its original appearance. Zhang Yan nodded and thought, looks like 1 Yuan Hun is not enough. He flicked his sleeve, took the swallowing stone, and continued to flee into the depths of the void. After dozens of days, he finally found his target. However, this time, he did not find Yuan Hun, but instead ran into an even more powerful creature. An eyeless creature. A belt of shattered stars stretched out for millions upon millions of kilometers, shining with dazzling light. However, it was actually the most sinister and bizarre creature in the void. When Zhang Yan saw this ferocious monster, he had an idea and said, "That's fine. If I can swallow this monster, it should be enough." He released his aura, and in an instant, a majestic, deep, and vast aura spread out in the air, and it continued to expand outwards as if there was no end to it. The eyeless creature was usually lying dormant, and would not do anything out of the ordinary unless there was a suitable prey. But now, it was startled by the aura, and countless starstones began to gather, revealing its true appearance. Its body was like a long worm, with stars as its scales, and heavenly dust as its body. Its body seemed to be made of colored glass, and as it floated in the void, it was impossible to see its head or tail. Zhang Yan's expression did not change, and he tossed out the swallowing stone once again. The eyeless creature ignored it. The only thing that threatened it was Zhang Yan, and to its huge body, the swallowing stone was not even a speck of dust. After the swallowing stone successfully fell into the creature's body, it began to devour everything in its body. However, the creature's body was too huge, and to it, this was only a negligible loss. If this continued, even if the swallowing stone worked hard for 100 years, it would not be able to devour it. However, this gem that was refined by the entire Bu Gosher clan was obviously not as simple as it seemed. When it sensed that it was a huge target, the stone began to expand, and in a few breaths' time, it became 10,000 feet tall, and the suction force also increased by 1,000 times. At this time, the eyeless creature also sensed the danger. Although the swallowing stone could not hurt its core, it clearly could not ignore it. It was not something that Yuan Hun could compare to. After trying a few times, and seeing that it could not do anything to the swallowing stone, it tried to drive it away. Naturally, Zhang Yan would not let it escape so easily. He raised his hand, and a demon image slowly appeared behind him, and he punched forward. In this boundless void, after the punch landed, the star stone shattered one after another, and the chi light also dissipated one after another. The middle part of the eyeless creature's body was destroyed. Originally, to this monster, the starlight dust was just an external object that it relied on. As long as the strand of innate essence was not exhausted, it could be gathered again in the future. But now it was different. While the swallowing stone was not paying attention to itself, it desperately devoured and continued to expand the battle. The eyeless creature tried a few times to deal with the swallowing stone, but it was stopped by Zhang Yan every time. At this time, it finally knew that if it did not get rid of this person first, it would not be able to solve the crisis, so it gave up on the swallowing stone and turned to attack. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Just in time." Behind him, the devil image began to grow, until it seemed to be able to prop up the heavens and cover the earth. It was not much smaller than the eyeless creature, and black smoke and murderous aura spread out behind it as it began to fight back. The eyeless creature only had the advantage of its huge body, and didn't have any divine abilities or transformations. Considering Meng Hao's true strength, he could fight it head-on. The only reason he had avoided it in the past was to avoid unnecessary conflict. Although the more battles he fought in this world, the easier it was for him to become one with heaven and earth, that would require him to fight dozens or even hundreds of battles. Furthermore, he had only fought a few people in the mountain and sea realm, so there was no need for him to worry about such things. As he and Swallowing Stone fought back and forth for 100 days, the eyeless creature began to be at a loss as to what to do. In the past, when it hunted its prey, all it had to do was wrap itself around it and wait for dozens or even hundreds of years. Once the enemy's energy and essence were exhausted, it would be able to reap some rewards. But now, the situation was beyond what it could handle. The pre-celestial essence was being attacked from both within and without, until it was completely gone, and the countless starlight and rubble crumbled away. It was at this point that the swallowing stone suddenly trembled, and its apertures opened up again. This time, a stream of quintessence qi emerged. Zhang Yan's eyes flickered. This was the moment he had been waiting for. Without any hesitation, he drew upon some magical power to grab the stone. Earlier, he had used his divine will to examine the stone, and found that it contained a clump of quintessence qi. After tens of thousands of years of repeated transformations, it had been purged of impurities, and was no less pure than any other precious material of heaven and earth. In fact, it might even be superior. The easiest way to get it would be to destroy the swallowing stone. However, he wasn't going to kill the goose that laid the golden eggs. Another method would be to get the swallowing stone to absorb enough foreign objects. Then the quintessence qi would heat up and begin to flow out. The only way to do that would be to capture a demon patriarch and have it consume it. However, doing that in the mountain and sea realm would cause too much of a commotion and could easily destroy the mountains, rivers, and land. In the void, however, things were different. There were many powerful living beings here, and although they weren't as powerful as the demon patriarchs, they were fundamentally not that much inferior. After absorbing a few strands of the stone's aura, and seeing that there was no more movement from it, he put it away, then broke through the void and returned to the blue sky palace. After sitting down, he said, "Where is Zhang Chan?" A moment later, a golden thread bloodworm entered the palace, which transformed into a pale-faced young man. He kowtowed and said, "Your humble servant offers greetings, master." Zhang Yan said, "I need you to do something. However, it will be a dangerous mission, and you won't be able to get any help. If you aren't careful, your life will be in danger. Are you willing?" Zhang Chan said loudly, "Please tell me what you need me to do, master." Zhang Yan smiled, then flicked his finger to release the strand of quintessence qi he had just now. "First, refine this qi." Without any hesitation, Zhang Chan sucked in the quintessence qi, then let out a muffled grunt, as if he couldn't handle the power, and reverted to his true form. His body grew larger, and around his neck, a hard, black armor appeared. The membranous wings on his back stretched out to either side, and a pair of silver-gold feelers grew out of the top of his head. At the same time, countless barbed hooks grew out of his feet, making him look even more ferocious. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.